Welcome back to another episode of Infidelity Tales Lab. We're thankful for your continued viewership. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? We love knowing our global reach. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Foundation of a Fool. Robert Bobby Kellerman had always believed that love was measured in sacrifice. At 52, the soft-spoken contractor had built his life around this principle, constructing not just houses, but a family that he thought appreciated his unwavering dedication. His calloused hands, weathered from decades of honest work, had provided everything his wife Linda and son Travis ever wanted. The Kellerman family lived in Millbrook Heights, a middle-class neighborhood where Bobby's construction business had earned him respect among neighbors. He wasn't wealthy, but he was reliable, the kind of man who would give his last dollar to help someone he loved. His wife Linda, 47 with platinum blonde hair and a taste for design and knockoffs, had grown comfortable with Bobby's generous nature over their 23 years of marriage. Travis, their 25-year-old son, had inherited his mother's sense of entitlement without any of his father's work ethic. After dropping out of college twice, he'd spent the last 3 years bouncing between part-time jobs while living rent-free in Bobby's basement. Despite his failures, Bobby continued to support him, believing that unconditional love would eventually guide his son toward success. The trouble began 6 months ago when Travis announced his engagement to Rebecca Morrison, a 23-year-old social media influencer with 30,000 followers and dreams bigger than her income. Becca was everything Travis thought he deserved. Beautiful, ambitious, and expensive. She had long auburn hair, green eyes, and a smile that could charm money from miser's wallet. "Dad, we want a real wedding," Travis had said over dinner that night, his arm around Becca as she scrolled through Pinterest boards filled with chandelier-lit ballrooms and 5-tier cakes. Nothing cheap or embarrassing. Becca's followers will be watching everything. Bobby had looked at his son's earnest face and felt the familiar tug of paternal obligation. "How much are we talking about, son?" "$35,000 should cover it," Becca chimed in sweetly, showing him photos of her dream venue. "The Grandview Manor. It's where all the influencers get married." Linda nodded approvingly. "Robert, the boy deserves a nice wedding. We can't have people thinking we're cheap." Bobby's construction business was steady but not lucrative. $35,000 was nearly half his annual profit, but looking at his son's hopeful expression, he couldn't say no. "All right," he said quietly. "I'll make it work." That decision marked the beginning of Bobby's financial fast. He cut his grocery budget to $10 a week, living on ramen noodles and peanut butter sandwiches. He canceled his cable, sold his fishing boat, and took on extra weekend jobs to save every penny. When Linda complained about their reduced lifestyle, he simply worked longer hours. "You're never home anymore," Linda would say, though she spent her days shopping for the wedding with Becca, using Bobby's credit cards for essential purchases. "I'm doing this for Travis," Bobby would reply, exhausted after 14-hour workdays. It's his big day. What Bobby didn't know was that his sacrifices had become a source of entertainment for his family. Linda had grown closer to Becca over the wedding planning, bonding over their shared view of Bobby as an endless ATM machine. They developed a routine of mocking his frugal meals and desperate attempts to save money, treating his devotion as both pathetic and useful. Meanwhile, Travis had found validation in Becca's attention and her friends' admiration for his generous family. He never mentioned that his father was eating ramen while paying for their champagne dreams, preferring to let people assume the money came easily. Dr. Michael Hendricks entered the picture 3 months into the wedding planning. The 40-year-old orthopedic surgeon was Linda's new patient. She'd started visiting his clinic for chronic back pain that conveniently required weekly appointments. Tall, distinguished, and recently divorced, Michael represented everything Linda felt she'd missed by marrying a simple contractor. Their affair began with coffee after appointments, progressed to lunch dates, and eventually became passionate encounters in Michael's downtown condo. Linda told Bobby she joined a book club that met twice a week, explaining her absences with elaborate stories about discussing romance novels with other housewives. Michael was intrigued by Linda's situation. A successful surgeon who enjoyed the finer things, he found her stories about Bobby's penny-pinching, both amusing and contemptible. "Why do you stay with him?" he'd ask during their afternoons together. "He's useful," Linda would reply, admiring her reflection in Michael's bathroom mirror. "He'll pay for anything if you know how to ask." But after Travis's wedding, maybe it's time for changes. Neither Linda nor Michael realized that Bobby's neighbor, Mrs. Henderson, had been watching Linda's unusual schedule with growing suspicion. The elderly widow had always liked Bobby and noticed how thin he'd become while his wife seemed happier than ever. Chapter 2. Threads Unraveling. Bobby's dedication to the wedding became an obsession that consumed every aspect of his life. He'd wake at 4 a.m. to start work early, maximize his billable hours, and return home after dark to find Linda and Becca giggling over wedding magazines in the living room. The house always smelled of takeout, Chinese food, pizza, or Thai cuisine that cost more than Bobby's weekly grocery budget. "Dad, you look terrible," Travis observed one evening, though his tone carried more annoyance than concern. "You're embarrassing us." Becca's friends are starting to ask questions. Bobby caught his reflection in the hallway mirror. Hollow cheeks, exhausted eyes, clothes hanging loose on his shrinking frame. "I'm fine, son. Just working hard for your special day." Becca smiled, that practiced influencer smile. "Mr. Kellerman, you're so sweet. This wedding is going to be absolutely perfect. My followers are going to die when they see the photos." The wedding expenses kept climbing. First came the upgraded floral arrangements, an additional $3,000 because Becca decided roses were too basic. Then the custom lighting package for better photos, another $2,000. Each new expense meant more ramen dinners and longer workdays for Bobby. Linda had grown bolder with her affair, sometimes returning from her book club with the scent of expensive cologne clinging to her clothes. She'd started dropping hints about wanting more excitement in her life, mentioning divorced friends who were living their best lives and traveling to exotic destinations. "Maybe after the wedding, we should think about taking a cruise," she suggested one night as Bobby calculated their debt on his laptop. "Linda, we'll be broke for years after this wedding," Bobby replied without looking up. "Maybe when business picks up." She sighed dramatically. "You never want to do anything fun anymore, Robert. It's like you've given up on living." Meanwhile, Travis and Becca had settled into their roles as entitled royalty. They'd moved their planning sessions to coffee shops and restaurants, using Bobby's credit cards to fund their daily outings while discussing their future with casual cruelty. "Your dad's so desperate to please everyone," Becca observed during one of their cafe meetings. "It's actually kind of sad." "He's always been like that," Travis replied, scrolling through his phone. "Mom says he'll sacrifice anything to avoid conflict. Makes him easy to manipulate." Their friend Jake Morrison, Becca's older brother, had recently returned from Los Angeles with tales of startup success and venture capital. The 28-year-old had convinced himself he was destined for greatness despite a track record of failed businesses and mounting debt. He'd been staying in Becca's apartment, charming her with stories of Hollywood connections and upcoming opportunities. "You should come to LA after the wedding," Jake suggested during one of their group dinners. "I've got connections in the entertainment industry. Becca could be huge on the West Coast." Travis liked the idea of reinventing himself in California, far from his father's disappointed glances and the neighborhood kids who remembered his failures. "Maybe we will," he said. "Dad's already paying for everything anyway." Dr. Michael Hendricks had grown tired of Linda's constant complaining about Bobby. Initially, her stories about her husband's frugality had amused him, but after months of hearing the same complaints, he'd begun to see Linda's true nature: selfish, entitled, and utterly without loyalty. "When are you going to leave him?" Michael asked during one of their encounters. "You talk about wanting a better life, but you won't take any steps toward it." Linda hesitated. She enjoyed the affair's excitement, but Bobby's steady income provided security that Michael's interest might not. "After the wedding," she promised. "Once Travis is settled, I'll be ready to start over." Mrs. Henderson had seen enough. The elderly woman had watched Linda's suspicious behavior for weeks, noting the time she left and returned, the way she checked her appearance before going to her book club, and the general air of deception that surrounded her activities. One afternoon, while Bobby was at work, Mrs. Henderson made her decision. She walked across the street and knocked on the Kellerman's door. "Linda, dear," she said when Linda answered, looking slightly flustered, "I was wondering about that book club of yours. I've been looking for something to do with my evenings, and it sounds wonderful." Linda's face went pale. "Oh, Mrs. Henderson, it's a very specific group. We read very particular types of books. Romance novels, mostly. Very adult themes." "How perfect!" Mrs. Henderson smiled innocently. "I do love a good romance. Where do you meet? I'd love to join." Linda stammered through increasingly implausible explanations until Mrs. Henderson smiled knowingly and left. The old woman had her confirmation. Linda Kellerman was lying about her twice-weekly absences, and poor Bobby deserved to know the truth. Chapter 3. The Sound of Truth. The morning of the final payment delivery, Bobby stood in his kitchen eating his breakfast of instant oatmeal and black coffee. The check in his wallet represented his last savings, borrowed money from his retirement account, and a second mortgage on their house. $35,000. Everything he had and more, invested in his son's happiness. Linda had already left for her book club, kissing his cheek with unusual enthusiasm. "The wedding's going to be beautiful, Robert. Travis is so lucky to have a father like you." Bobby smiled, feeling a rare moment of satisfaction. Despite the sacrifice, he'd kept his promise. His son would have the wedding of his dreams, and maybe afterward they could rebuild their financial stability together. The drive to Travis's apartment took 20 minutes through morning traffic. Bobby had called ahead to arrange the meeting, wanting to present the final payment check personally. This was his moment, the culmination of months of sacrifice that would finally earn his son's respect and gratitude. He climbed the stairs to Travis's second-floor apartment, mentally rehearsing a little speech about family, commitment, and the importance of building a strong marriage. The door was slightly ajar when he reached the landing, and he could hear voices inside. Travis, Becca, and someone else laughing about something. Bobby raised his hand to knock when he heard his son's voice clearly. "My dad's such a loser. He'll pay for anything if you guilt-trip him enough." The words hit Bobby like a physical blow. He froze, his hand suspended inches from the door. Becca's giggle followed. "Your mom said he's been eating ramen for weeks just to afford our dream wedding." Bobby's heart hammered as he recognized the third voice. Jake Morrison, Becca's brother, joining their laughter. "He's so desperate to be loved. It's actually pathetic." "The man sold his fishing boat," Travis continued, his voice filled with mock sympathy. "His precious boat that he used every weekend. Also, Princess Becca here could have her Instagram moment. Did you see him last week?" Becca added, "He's practically skeletal. I almost felt bad, but then I remembered. He's choosing to do this. Nobody's forcing him to be such a pushover." Jake's voice carried the casual cruelty of someone completely detached from consequences. "At least you're getting something out of it. Free wedding, free money. And when you move to LA, you'll never have to see his disappointed face again." "That's the plan," Travis agreed. "Once we're married and settled in California, I'm done with all this small-town family obligation bullshit. Let him eat ramen for the rest of his life if he wants." Bobby felt something fundamental shift inside his chest. Not heartbreak, but something colder and more decisive. The check in his pocket suddenly felt heavy with possibility rather than obligation. He looked at the door, at these people who had built their dreams on his suffering and made a choice that would change everything. Quietly, deliberately, Bobby slipped the check back into his pocket. He turned and walked down the stairs, his footsteps silent on the carpeted hallway. By the time he reached his truck, his mind was already calculating venue contracts, catering deposits, floral arrangements, and photography packages. Everything had cancellation clauses if he knew where to look. Bobby drove directly to Grandview Manor, where the wedding coordinator, Patricia Wells, greeted him with professional enthusiasm. "Mr. Kellerman, so wonderful to see you. We're all excited about Travis and Becca's big day next month." "About that," Bobby said calmly, "I need to cancel everything." Patricia's smile faltered. "Cancel? But the wedding is in 4 weeks. We've already begun preparations and the deposits." "Check the contract," Bobby interrupted, pulling out his copy of the agreement. "Section 12, subsection 4. Full cancellation allowed with 48 hours notice for events more than 30 days out. I'm giving you 30 days. Patricia's face went pale as she reviewed the paperwork. Bobby had read every contract thoroughly, understanding the legal implications of each clause. Mr. Kellerman, are you sure? The deposits were substantial. Keep them, Bobby said. Consider it compensation for your trouble. But the wedding is canceled, effective immediately. He spent the next 3 hours systematically canceling every vendor, every service, every detail that Travis and Becca had so carefully planned. The florist, the photographer, the caterer, the band. Each cancellation was polite but final. Bobby's contractor's reputation preceded him. These business owners trusted his word and didn't question his decisions. By evening, Bobby had dismantled his son's dream wedding with the same methodical precision he used to construct buildings. The only difference was how satisfying destruction could be when it was justified. His phone began ringing at 8 a.m. the next morning. Chapter 4. The Reckoning Begins. Travis's voice cracked with panic when Bobby finally answered his phone on the 10th ring. Dad, what the hell did you do? The venue called this morning. They said you canceled everything. Bobby sat calmly at his kitchen table, eating his first real breakfast in months. Eggs, bacon, toast, and fresh orange juice. The silence on the phone stretched as Travis waited for explanation, apology, or justification. I heard you yesterday, Bobby said finally, his voice carrying a tone Travis had never heard before. At your apartment. You, Becca, and her brother having a good laugh about your old man. The silence deepened. Bobby could practically hear Travis's mind racing, trying to calculate damage control strategies. Dad, listen, we were just what? Bobby's voice remained eerily calm. Just joking about how I'm eating ramen, so your princess can have her Instagram moment? Just laughing about how pathetic I am for loving my son enough to sacrifice everything. It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that. Bobby took a sip of his coffee, savoring the taste of something he'd denied himself for months. $35,000, Travis. That's what I've spent on your wedding. You want to know how I raised that money? Travis said nothing. I mortgaged our house, cleaned out my retirement account, sold everything I owned that had any value. I've been eating one meal a day for 4 months so you could have your dream wedding. And you think I'm a desperate loser. Dad, please. The wedding's canceled, Bobby said flatly. Every vendor, every service, every single detail you and your fiancé spent months planning. Gone. Travis's voice rose to near hysteria. You can't do this. People are coming from all over the country. Becca's family, her friends. Everyone will know we've been humiliated. Should have thought about that before you decided to humiliate me. Bobby hung up and turned off his phone. For the first time in months, he felt genuinely hungry. Not the desperate hunger of enforced poverty, but the satisfied hunger of a man who'd earned his appetite. The next call came to the house phone an hour later. Linda's voice was shrill with panic. Robert, what have you done? Travis is beside himself. You've embarrassed the entire family. I've embarrassed the family? Bobby laughed, and the sound sent chills down Linda's spine. She'd never heard her husband laugh like that. Cold, bitter, and completely without warmth. Tell me, Linda, how's your book club? Linda's sharp intake of breath confirmed what Bobby had suspected. Mrs. Henderson had visited him the previous evening, her elderly face creased with concern and righteous anger. She told him about Linda's suspicious behavior, the lies about book clubs, and her growing certainty that Linda was having an affair. I don't know what you're talking about, Linda said weakly. Dr. Michael Hendricks, Bobby said simply. Orthopedic surgeon, downtown Medical Plaza, Tuesday and Thursday afternoons. The phone went dead. Becca arrived 30 minutes later, bursting through the front door without knocking. Her perfectly styled hair was disheveled, her Instagram-ready makeup streaked with tears. Mr. Kellerman, please. You have to understand, Travis didn't mean those things. He was just showing off for Jake. Bobby looked at her with the same expression he might give a particularly annoying insect. Get out of my house. But the wedding? There is no wedding. My family's already bought plane tickets. My dress cost $3,000. My followers. Your followers? Bobby stood up slowly, and something in his posture made Becca step backward. You're worried about your social media followers? It's my career. You don't have a career. You have a hobby that depends on other people's money. And this particular source of funding just dried up. Becca's true nature emerged as her panic grew. You can't do this to us. We've planned everything. We deserve this wedding. You deserve exactly what you've earned, Bobby replied, which is nothing. After she left, Bobby made himself lunch, his first midday meal in months. He was cutting into a sandwich when Jake Morrison knocked on his door, his startup swagger replaced by desperate calculation. Mr. Kellerman, we need to talk, Jake said, pushing past Bobby into the living room. This situation has gotten out of hand. Has it? Look, I understand you're upset, but you're making a mistake. Becca and Travis love each other, and you're destroying their happiness over some stupid misunderstanding. Bobby studied Jake Morrison, the failed entrepreneur who'd convinced his sister she deserved a $35,000 wedding funded by a man he'd called pathetic. Tell me about Los Angeles, Jake. Tell me about these business opportunities you're promising my son. Jake's confidence flickered. Well, things are still developing. How much money do you owe? What? Simple question. How much money do you currently owe to various creditors? Jake's face went red. That's none of your business. It became my business when you started planning to take my son to California based on your connections. So I'll ask again, how much money do you owe? $17,000, Jake mumbled. Credit cards? Mostly. Any actual job prospects in Los Angeles? Jake's silence answered the question. Get out, Bobby said quietly. And take your sister and my son with you when you leave town. I don't want to see any of you again. You're making a huge mistake, Jake threatened. Becca has influence. She can make your life very difficult. Bobby smiled then, and Jake Morrison felt something primitive and frightening in that expression. Son, I've spent 4 months eating ramen noodles while watching my family spend my money and mock my sacrifice. My wife is cheating on me with a surgeon. My son thinks I'm a pathetic loser, and his fiancée considers me an ATM machine. Exactly what part of my life do you think you can make more difficult? Jake left without another word. Chapter 5. The Doctor's Dilemma. Dr. Michael Hendricks was finishing his morning surgery when his phone buzzed with an urgent text from Linda. Bobby knows. Need to talk immediately. Michael's hands remained steady as he completed the final sutures, but his mind raced through implications. He'd always known the affair carried risks, but Linda had assured him that Bobby was too passive and devoted to ever suspect anything. The surgeon prided himself on calculated decisions, and this situation was rapidly spinning beyond his control. Linda was waiting in his office when he finished with his patients, her usual composure replaced by barely contained panic. He knows about us, she said without preamble, and he's canceled Travis's entire wedding. How much does he know? Michael asked, already calculating damage control strategies. Everything. The book club story, your name, even your clinic location. Someone must have been watching me. Michael poured himself a scotch from the bar card in his office, not offering one to Linda. His recent divorce had cost him dearly, and another scandal could devastate his practice. Most of his patients were middle-aged women who expected their orthopedic surgeon to embody stability and respectability. What exactly do you want from me, Linda? The question caught her off guard. I want us to figure this out together. We need to manage Bobby, convince him to— No, Michael interrupted. What you need is to go home and salvage your marriage. This was always supposed to be temporary. Linda stared at him. Temporary? You said you loved me. I said a lot of things, but I'm not destroying my practice over someone else's marital problems. Someone else's marital problems? Linda's voice rose dangerously. We've been together for 3 months. We've talked about me leaving Bobby, about us having a future together. Michael finished his scotch and straightened his tie. Linda, you're an attractive woman, and we've had some pleasant times together. But I never promised you anything permanent. You're married, you have a family, and frankly, your husband sounds like a decent man who doesn't deserve what you've been doing to him. Linda felt the ground shifting beneath her feet. In her fantasies, Michael would rescue her from her mundane life with Bobby, providing the excitement and luxury she felt she deserved. The reality of his dismissal was devastating. "You can't just abandon me now," she pleaded. "Bobby will divorce me. I'll have nothing." "Then you should have thought about that before you started lying to your husband." Michael moved toward his office door, clearly ending the conversation. "I have patience to see." After Linda left, Michael made 2 phone calls. The first was to his lawyer, informing him about potential complications from the affair. The second was to his clinic's reputation management consultant, a necessary precaution in his profession. Meanwhile, Bobby was implementing the second phase of his plan. He drove to the office of Patricia Wells, the wedding coordinator, carrying a folder of documents. "Mr. Kellerman," Patricia said nervously, "I hope you're not here to change your mind about the cancellation. We've already notified all the vendors." "I'm not here about the wedding," Bobby interrupted. "I'm here about a business proposition." Patricia looked confused. "Business proposition?" Bobby opened his folder and spread several contracts across Patricia's desk. "I want to hire your services for a different event. Same date as the wedding would have been, same venue, similar scale." "What kind of event?" "A divorce party." Patricia's eyebrows rose. "A divorce party?" "For my wife. She doesn't know she's getting divorced yet, but she will soon. I want to throw her a celebration, something that will help her understand the new reality of her situation." Bobby's plan was intricate and utterly ruthless. He'd researched Linda's affair with the same methodical attention he'd given to wedding planning, documenting dates, times, and locations with photographic evidence courtesy of Mrs. Henderson's nephew, a private investigator. "I want everyone to know," Bobby continued. "Everyone who was invited to the wedding, everyone in Linda's social circle, everyone who watched my family treat me like a fool for the past 4 months. They'll all receive invitations to Linda's divorce celebration." Patricia was both horrified and fascinated. "Mr. Kellerman, are you sure about this? It seems quite vengeful." "Ma'am, vengeful would be burning down their house. This is just public education. The invitations were works of art." Bobby had hired a graphic designer to create elegant cards that looked like wedding announcements at first glance. Only closer inspection revealed the true message. "Robert Kellerman requests the pleasure of your company at a celebration honoring the end of his marriage to Linda Kellerman, whose affair with Dr. Michael Hendricks has provided the entertainment and inspiration for this joyous occasion." The details were meticulously planned. Instead of a wedding cake, there would be a divorce cake decorated with broken hearts and wedding rings. Instead of wedding favors, guests would receive small picture frames containing photos of Linda entering and leaving Michael's medical building. Instead of wedding toasts, Bobby planned to give a speech detailing his months of sacrifice and his family's betrayal. "This is quite elaborate," Patricia observed, reviewing the plans. "And expensive. I've got $35,000 that was supposed to go to a wedding," Bobby replied. "Might as well put it to good use." That evening, Travis arrived at Bobby's house with Jake Morrison in tow. Both young men looked haggard, their earlier arrogance replaced by desperate confusion. "Dad, we need to talk," Travis said, his voice lacking its usual entitlement. Bobby didn't invite them in. "Talk. This has gone too far," Jake said, trying to reclaim some authority. "You're humiliating innocent people over a private conversation." "Innocent people?" Bobby laughed that cold laugh again. "Son, there hasn't been an innocent person in this story since it started. You came to my town, convinced my son to take on debt for a wedding he can't afford, planned to drag him to California based on your non-existent connections, and called me pathetic for paying for your sister's fantasies." "We can fix this," Travis interjected. "I'll apologize. We'll scale back the wedding." "There is no wedding," Bobby said flatly. "And there's no fixing this. You showed me who you really are, and I believe you." Jake stepped forward aggressively. "You're making a mistake, old man. Becca has connections, influence." Bobby's expression didn't change, but something in his stillness made Jake stop talking. "Let me explain something to you boys," Bobby said quietly. "I've spent my entire adult life building things. Houses, businesses, relationships. I know exactly how things are constructed, and I know exactly how to tear them down. Your sister's influence is 30,000 followers who don't know her real name. My influence is 25 years of business relationships in this town." He paused, letting that sink in. "Jake, your credit score is 487. You owe $17,000 across 6 credit cards and have been evicted from 2 apartments in Los Angeles. Travis, you've never held a job for more than 8 months, and your employment history reads like a catalog of failure. Becca's Instagram income last year was $1,400. Both young men stared at him. So when you talk about connections and influence, remember that I actually have both. And unlike your family, I know how to use them. Travis tried one last appeal. Dad, I'm your son. Bobby looked at his son, really looked at him for what felt like the first time in years. No, Travis. My son died yesterday when I heard him call me a pathetic loser. You're just someone who happens to share my DNA and my last name. For now. Chapter 6, The Social Media Storm. Becca Morrison's Instagram account had become her identity, her career, and her entire sense of self-worth over the past 3 years. Her 30,000 followers represented validation, opportunity, and she convinced herself, genuine influence. The canceled wedding wasn't just a personal disappointment. It was a professional catastrophe that threatened to expose the carefully constructed illusion of her lifestyle. She'd spent the night after Bobby's cancellation crafting the perfect social media response, trying to spin the disaster into sympathy and engagement. Her post featured a tear-streaked selfie with dramatic lighting and a caption about toxic family members and overcoming obstacles. The response was immediate, but not what she'd expected. Comments ranged from supportive to skeptical to downright hostile. Several followers had done basic research and discovered inconsistencies in Becca's story. Others questioned why a woman with supposedly substantial social media income needed her fiancé's father to pay for her wedding. The situation escalated when Bobby's friend Charlie Wu, a local contractor with his own modest social media following, posted a response that went viral within their community. Charlie had watched Bobby's physical deterioration during the wedding planning and felt compelled to share the truth. Some of y'all might have seen posts about a toxic father ruining his son's wedding. Charlie wrote, "Let me tell you about Bobby Kellerman. This man has been eating 1 meal a day for 4 months, sold everything he owned, and mortgaged his house to pay for his son's wedding. Then he overheard his son and future daughter-in-law calling him a pathetic loser for making these sacrifices. Y'all can judge for yourselves who's toxic in this situation." Charlie included photos of Bobby from 6 months earlier, healthy, smiling, proud, contrasted with recent pictures showing his dramatic weight loss and exhaustion. The post was shared hundreds of times within hours, reaching far beyond Millbrook Heights into surrounding communities. Becca watched her follower count drop by 2,000 in a single day. Worse, local businesses began distancing themselves from her brand. The boutique clothing store that had sponsored her outfits posted a statement ending their partnership. The restaurant where she'd hosted sponsored reviews quietly removed her tagged photos. Jake Morrison, meanwhile, was discovering that his sister's social media crisis was only the beginning of his problems. His landlord in Los Angeles had begun eviction proceedings, and his credit card companies were demanding payment on overdue accounts. His plan to use Travis and Becca's wedding as an opportunity to network and potentially secure investment had collapsed, leaving him stranded in a small town with mounting debts and no prospects. Dr. Michael Hendricks received his first glimpse of Bobby's true nature when 3 of his patients canceled appointments in a single morning. All 3 were wives of men who worked in Bobby's professional network, contractors, suppliers, and business owners who comprised a significant portion of the local economy. "I think it would be best if I found another orthopedic surgeon," Mrs. Patterson explained when Michael's receptionist called to confirm her appointment. "My husband works with Bobby Kellerman, and we feel there might be a conflict of interest." Michael initially dismissed the cancellations as coincidence, but by the end of the week, he'd lost 12 regular patients. His receptionist reported that new appointment requests had slowed to a trickle, and several referring physicians had quietly redirected their patients to other specialists in neighboring towns. Bobby hadn't made any direct threats or public accusations against Michael. He hadn't needed to. In a community where reputation was everything and business relationships were built on trust, the simple knowledge that Dr. Hendricks had betrayed a respected local businessman was enough to erode confidence. Linda found herself isolated in ways she'd never anticipated. Her social circle, largely composed of other contractors' wives and local business owners' spouses, began excluding her from their usual activities. Coffee dates were canceled, book club invitations, the real ones, stopped arriving, and conversations at the grocery store became awkwardly brief. The divorce papers arrived on a Thursday morning, delivered by a process server while Linda was still in her robe. The documents were comprehensive and devastating, detailing not only Bobby's intent to end their marriage, but also his complete financial documentation of Linda's affair. Bobby had been meticulous in his preparation. Bank records showed Linda's increased spending during the affair period, including purchases at expensive restaurants and boutique stores that far exceeded their usual budget. Phone records documented hundreds of calls and texts to Michael's number. Credit card statements revealed charges at hotels and spas on dates when Linda claimed to be at book club meetings. Most damaging was the private investigator's report, complete with photographs of Linda entering and leaving Michael's condo, detailed timelines of her activities, and sworn statements from witnesses, including Mrs. Henderson and several neighbors who had noticed Linda's suspicious behavior. Travis received his own package that same afternoon, an eviction notice from Bobby's house and a formal demand for repayment of all money provided for wedding expenses. Bobby's lawyer had structured the demand carefully, noting that since no wedding had occurred, the funds constituted loans rather than gifts, making them legally recoverable. The young man who had lived rent-free in his father's basement for 3 years suddenly faced the reality of supporting himself without any financial safety net. His part-time job at a sporting goods store provided barely enough income for basic expenses, let alone apartment rent and the debt Bobby was demanding. Becca's family situation grew more complicated when her parents drove up from Florida after hearing about the canceled wedding. Frank and Dorothy Morrison were retired middle-class people who had never approved of their daughter's social media career or her expensive tastes. $35,000? Frank Morrison asked incredulously when Becca explained the situation. You expected some man you barely knew to spend $35,000 on your wedding. It wasn't just for me, Dad, Becca protested. It was for Travis, too, and his family wanted. His family wanted him to have a nice wedding. Dorothy interrupted. They didn't want you to bankrupt them for Instagram photos. Frank Morrison was a retired electrician who understood the value of money and the cost of manual labor. The idea that his daughter had not only accepted such an extravagant gift, but had mocked the man providing it went against everything he'd tried to teach her about character and gratitude. You're coming home with us, Frank declared. This social media nonsense is over. You're going to get a real job and learn some respect for people who work for their money. Becca's protests fell on deaf ears. Her parents had seen enough of her entitled behavior and were determined to correct course before it was too late. The final blow to Becca's social media empire came when several of her followers began investigating her background more thoroughly. They discovered that many of her lifestyle posts were staged in borrowed or rented locations, that her designer outfits were often knockoffs or heavily discounted items presented as full-price purchases, and that her claims about income and independence were largely fabricated. A local blogger with a larger following than Becca's wrote a detailed expose titled The Influencer Illusion: How Social Media Stars Fake Their Success. Becca featured prominently as a case study in manufactured authenticity, complete with side-by-side comparisons of her claims versus reality. By the end of the month, Becca Morrison's social media career was effectively over. Her follower count had dropped below 15,000, her engagement rates had plummeted, and no legitimate businesses were willing to associate with her brand. As Bobby watched the systematic collapse of his betrayers' lives, he felt no satisfaction, only the cold completion of necessary work. Like demolishing a building that had become structurally unsound, the destruction was thorough, methodical, and irreversible. Chapter 7: The Divorce Celebration. The invitations to Bobby's divorce celebration were delivered exactly 4 weeks after he'd canceled the wedding, arriving in mailboxes throughout Millbrook Heights and the surrounding community. The elegant cardstock and sophisticated design initially fooled many recipients into thinking they were receiving wedding announcements, making the actual message even more shocking. Patricia Wells had initially resisted Bobby's unconventional request, but his calm determination and complete financial commitment had eventually won her over. The event planning industry thrived on memorable occasions, and Bobby's divorce party would certainly be unforgettable. The venue was the same Grandview Manor that would have hosted Travis and Becca's wedding. Bobby had requested minimal decorative changes from the original wedding plan, wanting guests to recognize exactly what celebration they were attending instead. The floral arrangements remained elegant, but were now composed entirely of funeral flowers, lilies, chrysanthemums, and roses in stark white and deep purple. Instead of wedding favors, each table's setting included a small silver frame containing one of the private investigators' photographs of Linda entering Dr. Hendricks' condo. The images were tastefully composed, but unmistakably incriminating, showing Linda checking her appearance in the building's lobby mirrors and looking around cautiously before entering. The guest list was comprehensive and carefully curated. Everyone who had been invited to the wedding received an invitation to the divorce celebration, along with additional recipients from Bobby's professional network, Linda's social circles, and the broader community. Local business owners, city council members, church congregations, and social clubs all received formal invitations to witness Linda Kellerman's public accounting. Word of the unusual event spread quickly through Millbrook Heights. Some people were appalled by Bobby's public vindictiveness. Others were fascinated by the dramatic turn of events, and many were simply curious to see how the situation would unfold. Linda received her invitation via certified mail, along with a note from Bobby. "Since you enjoyed celebrating behind my back, I thought you might appreciate celebrating in front of everyone." Dr. Michael Hendricks' invitation was delivered to his medical office, causing considerable gossip among his staff. The sophisticated-looking envelope had prompted his receptionist to open it, assuming it was a professional event, only to discover the shocking contents that quickly became the talk of the entire medical building. Travis found his invitation slipped under the door of the cheap motel room where he'd been staying since Bobby evicted him from the family home. His father had included a personal note. "Your presence is requested but not required. I thought you might enjoy seeing the conclusion of a situation you found so amusing." On the evening of the celebration, Bobby arrived at Grandview Manor wearing his best suit, the same one he'd planned to wear to his son's wedding. He'd gained back 15 pounds over the past month, and his face had regained some of its natural color and vitality. For the first time in months, he looked like a man in control of his circumstances. Nearly 200 people attended the event, drawn by curiosity, support for Bobby, or simply the spectacle of such an unprecedented social occasion. The local newspaper sent a reporter, and several attendees discreetly documented the evening on their phones, ensuring that the story would spread far beyond Millbrook Heights. Linda arrived separately, accompanied by her sister who had driven up from Atlanta to provide moral support. Linda looked haggard and defensive, her usual confident demeanor replaced by barely controlled anxiety. She considered not attending, but her lawyer had advised that absence would be interpreted as admission of guilt and would damage her position in the divorce proceedings. Dr. Hendricks did not attend, having left town 3 days earlier for what his office described as an extended medical conference. His absence was noted by many and interpreted as confirmation of his guilt. Bobby took the podium at 8 o'clock, after dinner had been served and the assembled guests had settled into the surreal atmosphere of celebrating the end of a marriage. His speech was neither angry nor emotional, but rather methodical and devastating in its completeness. "Thank you all for coming to celebrate this important milestone," he began, his voice carrying clearly through the elegant ballroom. "Many of you are planning to attend a wedding here tonight, celebrating the marriage of my son Travis to Rebecca Morrison. Instead, we're here to celebrate the end of my marriage to Linda." The room was absolutely silent. For those who might be wondering why we've gathered for such an unusual occasion, let me explain. 4 months ago, I committed to spending $35,000 on my son's wedding. That money represented my life savings, my retirement fund, and a second mortgage on our family home. Bobby paused, letting the financial magnitude sink in with the audience. "I worked 14-hour days, 7 days a week, to earn that money. I ate one meal a day, sold my possessions, and sacrificed every comfort to ensure my son could have the wedding of his dreams. During those same 4 months, my wife Linda was having an affair with Dr. Michael Hendricks, meeting him twice weekly while telling me she was attending a book club. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd. Several people turned to look at Linda, who sat frozen at her table. Last month, I overheard my son and his fiancée laughing about my sacrifices. They called me a pathetic loser who would pay for anything if you guilt-trip him enough. They found it hilarious that I was eating ramen noodles to fund their dream wedding. They speculated about how desperate I was to be loved. Bobby's voice remained steady and conversational, as if he were discussing the weather rather than devastating personal betrayals. That conversation helped me understand something important. Respect cannot be purchased, loyalty cannot be bought, and love that requires payment isn't actually love at all. So I canceled the wedding, filed for divorce, and decided to throw this celebration instead. He gestured to the assembled crowd. Everyone in this room has worked for their money, built their relationships on mutual respect, and understood that trust is earned rather than assumed. You understand the value of keeping your word, honoring your commitments, and treating people with basic human decency. Bobby reached into his jacket and pulled out a manila envelope. In this envelope are copies of the private investigator's report documenting Linda's affair, including photographs, bank records showing her increased spending during the affair period, and phone records documenting hundreds of calls and texts to her lover. I'm not sharing these details to embarrass Linda further. Her actions have already accomplished that. I'm sharing them because truth matters, and I want everyone to understand exactly what we're celebrating tonight. The silence in the room was deafening. Linda had tears streaming down her face, but she remained in her seat, seemingly unable to move or speak. This celebration represents freedom, Bobby continued. Freedom from betrayal, from manipulation, from people who mistake kindness for weakness and generosity for stupidity. It represents the end of enabling selfish behavior and the beginning of holding people accountable for their choices. He looked directly at Linda for the first time. Linda, you chose to betray our marriage. Travis, you chose to mock my sacrifices. Rebecca, you chose to exploit my generosity. Dr. Hendricks, you chose to participate in destroying a family. These were all choices, not mistakes or misunderstandings. Tonight, we celebrate the consequences of your choices. Bobby raised his glass of champagne to truth, accountability, and the end of taking decent people for granted. The room slowly joined his toast, the sound of clinking glasses creating an eerie conclusion to the most unusual celebration Millbrook Heights had ever witnessed. Chapter 8. Consequences and Reckonings. The weeks following the divorce celebration brought swift and comprehensive consequences for everyone involved in Bobby's betrayal. The public nature of the event had guaranteed that the story would spread throughout the community and beyond, creating ripple effects that touched every aspect of the betrayers' lives. Linda's divorce proceedings became a masterclass in legal preparation and strategic destruction. Bobby's lawyer, Margaret Shun, was one of the most respected family attorneys in the state, and Bobby had given her unlimited resources to ensure a comprehensive victory. Your husband has documented everything, Margaret explained to Linda's attorney during their first meeting. Bank records, phone logs, photographic evidence, witness statements, and a private investigator's report that reads like a spy novel. Mrs. Kellerman has no defensible position. Linda's own attorney, a young lawyer from a discount legal clinic, was overwhelmed by the scope of Bobby's evidence and the skill of his representation. The case was settled within 6 weeks, with Linda receiving minimal alimony and no claim to Bobby's business assets or retirement accounts. The final divorce decree was brutal in its completeness. Linda was required to assume responsibility for half of the wedding-related debts, despite never receiving the benefit of the celebration. She lost all rights to the family home, Bobby's business, and any jointly held assets beyond basic personal possessions. Most significantly, the court awarded Bobby a judgment for reimbursement of all expenses related to Linda's affair, restaurant bills, hotel charges, gifts, and other costs that had been paid with marital funds. The total exceeded $12,000, money that Linda didn't have and couldn't reasonably earn. Dr. Michael Hendricks discovered that small-town scandals could destroy professional reputations with devastating efficiency. His patient base continued to erode as word of the affair spread through medical communities in surrounding areas. Referring physicians quietly redirected their patients to other specialists, and his hospital privileges came under review by the Ethics Committee. The final blow came when the state medical board opened an investigation into Hendricks' conduct, specifically focusing on whether he had violated professional ethics by engaging in an affair with a patient. Linda's medical records showed that her back pain complaints had been largely fabricated, raising questions about whether Hendricks had properly diagnosed and treated her condition or had been enabling her deception from the beginning. Faced with mounting professional and financial pressures, Hendricks made the decision to relocate his practice to another state. His departure from Millbrook Heights was quiet and unceremonious, leaving behind a damaged reputation and a medical practice that sold for far less than its previous value. Travis's situation became desperate with shocking speed. His part-time job at the sporting goods store barely covered his motel expenses, let alone food, transportation, and the mounting debt Bobby was demanding through legal channels. His attempts to find better employment were hampered by his lack of experience and the growing local awareness of his role in the family scandal. Word had spread throughout the community about Travis's mocking comments regarding his father's sacrifices, and many business owners were reluctant to hire someone with such poor character references. Jake Morrison abandoned his sister and Travis after realizing that their situation was beyond salvaging. He returned to Los Angeles with outstanding debts and warrants for his arrest, leaving behind a trail of unpaid bills and broken promises. Becca Morrison's social media empire continued its spectacular collapse. Her parents had forced her to delete her Instagram account and return to Florida, where she was working as a cashier at a grocery store while living in her childhood bedroom. The transition from social media influencer to minimum wage employee was humiliating and complete. Her parents, Frank and Dorothy Morrison, were profoundly ashamed of their daughter's behavior and had instituted strict rules for her rehabilitation. She was required to pay rent, work full-time, and attend weekly sessions with a counselor who specialized in treating social media addiction and entitlement issues. "You will learn the value of honest work and treating people with respect," Frank told his daughter. "And if you ever behave this way again, you can find somewhere else to live." The broader community response to Bobby's actions was mixed but generally supportive. Many people admired his strategic approach to dealing with betrayal, while others felt that public humiliation was an excessive response to private family problems. Mrs. Henderson, who had first alerted Bobby to Linda's suspicious behavior, became something of a local celebrity. Her role in exposing the affair was viewed heroically by those who supported Bobby's actions. "Bobby Kellerman is a good man who is being taken advantage of by people who should have loved him," she told anyone who would listen. "Sometimes good people need to stand up for themselves, and sometimes that means other people get hurt. But they hurt themselves with their own choices." Charlie Wu, Bobby's friend who had posted the viral social media response defending him, received dozens of new construction contracts from people who wanted to support businesses that stood up for decent values. The post had been shared thousands of times and had made Charlie something of an internet folk hero. "People are tired of watching good folks get walked all over," Charlie explained to a local reporter. Bobby's story resonated because we've all seen families where one person does all the sacrificing while everyone else does all the taking. Travis made one final attempt to reconcile with his father, arriving at Bobby's house on a rainy Thursday evening. He looked thin and desperate, his usual arrogance replaced by genuine fear about his future. "Dad, please," Travis said when Bobby answered the door. "I know I messed up. I know what I said was wrong. But I'm your son. Doesn't that count for something?" Bobby looked at the young man who shared his DNA but had rejected every value he'd tried to instill. "You stopped being my son when you decided I was a joke. Being related to someone doesn't give you the right to treat them with contempt." "I was just showing off," Travis pleaded. "I didn't mean it." "Yes, you did," Bobby replied calmly. "You meant every word. You just didn't expect me to hear it." Travis tried a different approach. What about forgiveness? What about second chances? Bobby considered the question seriously. Travis, forgiveness isn't the same thing as trust. I might forgive you someday, but I will never trust you again. And without trust, we don't have a relationship. So that's it. You're just going to abandon your only child. No, Bobby said firmly. You abandoned me when you decided I was someone to be mocked and exploited. I'm just acknowledging the choice you already made. Travis left that night knowing that his relationship with his father was permanently severed. The young man who had grown up expecting unconditional support regardless of his behavior was finally facing the consequences of treating love as an unlimited resource. Chapter 9. New Foundations. 6 months after the divorce celebration, Bobby Kellerman stood in the morning sunlight on the deck of his new fishing boat, watching the sunrise paint the lake in shades of gold and crimson. The boat was bigger and better than the one he'd sold to fund Travis's wedding, purchased with money from Linda's settlement and his thriving construction business. The scandal had, paradoxically, been excellent for Bobby's professional reputation. Clients throughout the region sought out the contractor who had stood up for himself with such strategic brilliance, viewing his actions as evidence of strong character and reliable judgment. His calendar was booked solid for the next 18 months, and he'd had to hire 3 additional employees to handle the increased demand. Bobby's physical health had recovered completely from the months of sacrifice and stress. He'd regained the weight he'd lost, started exercising regularly, and looked younger than he had in years. More importantly, his mental health had improved dramatically once he'd stopped enabling other people's selfishness and started prioritizing his own well-being. Mrs. Henderson had become a regular companion for Bobby's morning fishing trips, their friendship deepened by her role in exposing Linda's betrayal. The elderly widow was sharp-witted and excellent company, sharing Bobby's appreciation for simple pleasures and genuine relationships. Any regrets? She asked one morning as they waited for the fish to bite. Bobby considered the question carefully. I regret that it took me so long to see who they really were. I regret enabling their behavior for as long as I did. But I don't regret how it ended. Linda had moved to another state after the divorce was finalized, unable to rebuild her reputation in Millbrook Heights. Her sister had provided temporary housing, but their relationship was strained by Linda's financial dependence and continuing refusal to accept responsibility for her choices. Linda's attempts to contact Bobby had been ignored completely. His phone number was changed, his address was confidential, and his lawyer had instructions to refuse all communication attempts. As far as Bobby was concerned, Linda Kellerman no longer existed. Dr. Hendricks had successfully relocated his practice to Nevada, but his patient base remained smaller than his previous success. The medical community was surprisingly small, and word of his ethical violations had followed him across state lines. His income had dropped by more than 60%, and his professional reputation remained permanently damaged. Travis had eventually found work at a warehouse in a neighboring town, earning barely enough to rent a studio apartment and maintain basic transportation. His attempts to rebuild relationships with extended family members had been unsuccessful, as word of his betrayal had spread throughout their social network. The young man who had once planned to move to Los Angeles for startup opportunities was now working third shift loading trucks and living paycheck to paycheck. His dreams of easy success and inherited wealth had been replaced by the harsh reality of supporting himself without family assistance. Becca Morrison remained in Florida with her parents, working at the grocery store and slowly learning to live without social media validation. Her Instagram account had been permanently deleted, and she was prohibited from creating new social media profiles as part of her rehabilitation program. The transition from influencer lifestyle to normal employment had been traumatic, but Becca was beginning to understand the value of honest work and genuine relationships. Her parents reported that she was making progress, though they remained vigilant about preventing any regression to her previous entitled behavior. Jake Morrison had been arrested in Los Angeles on outstanding warrants and was serving 6 months in county jail. His startup dreams had been replaced by the reality of criminal charges for check fraud and identity theft. The charming entrepreneur persona had been revealed as elaborate deception designed to exploit other people's trust and resources. Bobby's new life was simpler, but infinitely more satisfying than his previous existence as an enabler and financial provider for ungrateful family members. He joined a fishing club, started attending community events, and developed genuine friendships with people who shared his values of hard work and mutual respect. His construction business had expanded beyond residential work to include commercial projects and public works contracts. The reputation he'd built through decades of honest work, combined with the public support he'd received after standing up to his betrayers, had opened doors to opportunities he'd never previously considered. Most importantly, Bobby had learned to recognize the difference between love and exploitation, between family loyalty and enabling destructive behavior, between forgiveness and foolishness. The lessons had been expensive and painful, but they had transformed him from a victim into someone who commanded genuine respect. One evening, while reviewing blueprints for a new community center project, Bobby received a phone call from an unknown number. When he answered, Travis's voice was barely recognizable, hoarse, desperate, and broken. "Dad, I need help," Travis said without preamble. "I lost my job, I'm being evicted, and I don't have anywhere else to turn." Bobby listened silently as his former son detailed the cascade of failures that had brought him to this desperate point. Travis had been fired from the warehouse for attendance problems, fallen behind on rent, and exhausted all other potential sources of assistance. "I know you hate me," Travis continued, "but I'm your son. I need you to help me one more time." Bobby's response was calm and final. "Travis, you made your choice when you decided I was someone to mock and exploit. You're experiencing the consequences of that choice. I hope you learn from them, but I won't interfere with the lessons you need to learn." "You can't just let me become homeless," Travis pleaded. "I'm not making you homeless," Bobby replied. "Your choices made you homeless. The difference is important." After hanging up, Bobby felt no satisfaction in his son's suffering, but also no obligation to prevent it. Travis was an adult who had made adult decisions, and those decisions carried adult consequences. Enabling his behavior would only delay his eventual reckoning with reality. Mrs. Henderson, who had overheard the conversation during one of their regular evening visits, nodded approvingly. "Hard choices," she said simply, "but necessary ones." Bobby poured himself a scotch and settled into his comfortable chair, looking out at the lake where he'd been fishing that morning. The house was quiet, peaceful, and entirely his own. No one was mocking his generosity, exploiting his love, or treating his sacrifices as jokes for their entertainment. For the first time in decades, Bobby Kellerman was surrounded only by people who respected him, valued his friendship, and treated him with the dignity he'd always deserved. The price of achieving that peace had been high, but it had been worth every penny. As he sat in his chair, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors, Bobby reflected on the most important lesson he'd learned. Some relationships aren't worth saving. Some people aren't worth forgiving. And sometimes the greatest act of love is refusing to enable someone's self-destruction. The phone rang again that evening, but Bobby didn't answer. Whatever crisis or emergency his former family was experiencing, they would have to solve it without his help. He'd given them everything he had to give, and they'd thrown it back in his face with contempt and mockery. Now, they could live with the consequences of their choices while he enjoyed the rewards of his own. The next morning, Bobby was back on his boat, fishing rod in hand, watching another sunrise over the water. Mrs. Henderson sat beside him, both of them comfortable in the peaceful silence of people who had nothing left to prove to anyone. It was, Bobby thought, exactly the kind of morning he'd been working toward his entire life. And for the first time in years, no one was asking him to pay for anyone else's dreams. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there. Subscribe to Infidelity Tales Lab for more stories. Now let's begin this one. Chapter 1. Ghosts in the Corridor. Cole Ewing sat beside the hospital bed, his hand wrapped around fingers that felt too cold for someone who just brought life into the world. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, sterile and indifferent to the miracle that had occurred 2 hours ago. His son, his beautiful, perfect son, slept in the bassinet beside them, tiny chest rising and falling with the certainty of new life. Melissa Matthews, no, Melissa Ewing now, smiled at him from the bed, but something in her expression seemed wrong. Too practiced, too perfect, like she'd rehearsed it in front of a mirror. "You should get coffee," she said softly. "You haven't slept in 26 hours. Cole nodded, though he wasn't tired. He'd learned long ago how to function on adrenaline and purpose. "You need anything? Just some iced chips." And maybe, she paused, her green eyes flickering to the door. "Maybe check if the birth certificate paperwork is ready? I want everything official before we leave." There was again that edge of urgency beneath her gentle tone. The same edge he'd noticed a dozen times over the past 9 months, always when discussing documents, accounts, or official records. Cole stood, stretching his 6-foot frame. At 42, he kept himself in shape, not vanity, but necessity. Control. The same control that had made him a successful appellate attorney and the same control that had gotten him through his divorce 3 years ago. "I'll be back in 15, he said, leaning down to kiss her forehead. Her skin was clammy. The hospital corridor stretched ahead, painted in those institutional colors meant to be soothing, but only managed sterile. Cole walked past rooms where other families celebrated their own beginnings, past nurses' stations and supply closets, his mind already ticking through the checklist Melissa had given him. He was 10 feet from the elevator when he saw her. Courtney Osborne, his ex-wife, though she'd reclaimed her maiden name with unseemly haste after their divorce, stood frozen by the water fountain. She'd aged in 3 years, new lines etched around her mouth, her auburn hair now showing threads of gray she'd never have allowed before. She wore scrubs, hospital scrubs, which surprised him. Last he'd heard, she was managing a boutique in Scottsdale. Cole. Her voice cracked on his name. Courtney. He kept his tone neutral, professional. They hadn't spoken since the final decree. Their marriage had ended cleanly, if painfully. A mutual acknowledgement that love had calcified into resentment somewhere between his 80th hour work weeks and her complete inability to handle solitude. "I heard you remarried," she said, something strange dancing in her dark eyes. "Congratulations." "Thank you. What brings you to the maternity ward?" "I transferred here 6 months ago. Pediatric nursing." She smiled, but it looked like a wound. "Funny how life works out. You here for?" "My son was born this morning." The color drained from Courtney's face so fast Cole actually reached out to steady her, old instincts overriding present awkwardness. But she jerked back from his touch, her eyes wide and fixed on something behind him. Cole turned. Melissa stood in the doorway of her room, 20 yards away, her hospital gown hanging off one shoulder, her face sheet white. The two women locked eyes across the distance, and Cole felt the temperature drop 10 degrees. "No," Courtney whispered. "No, no, no. Cole, when did you meet her?" "That's my wife." He kept his voice level, but his gut tightened. "Courtney what?" But she was already backing away, shaking her head, her hands trembling. "You need to God I can't. I can't be the one to—" She spun on her heel and ran, literally ran, her white sneakers squeaking against linoleum as she disappeared around the corner. Cole stood frozen for 3 heartbeats. When he looked back, Melissa had retreated into the room. He found her sitting on the bed, her face still pale, but composed now, eerily composed. "What was that about?" he asked. "How should I know?" Melissa's voice was steady, but her fingers knotted in the blanket. "Your ex-wife, right? Maybe she's just bitter, seeing you happy with someone else, with a baby. It can make people crazy." It was a reasonable explanation. It made sense. But Cole's instincts, honed through 15 years of cross-examining witnesses and reading juries, screamed that something was desperately wrong. His phone buzzed. The text was from an unknown number, but he knew instantly who'd sent it. Courtney's words tumbled across the screen in frantic, half-formed sentences. "Cole, please, you have to listen. Go to the police. That woman is not who she says she is. Her real name is Melissa Barrett, not Matthews. I know her. I know her. She destroyed my brother's life 5 years ago. Same pattern. Marriage, baby, then she took everything. You try to stop her, and Cole, he killed himself. She drove him to it. You have to protect yourself. Please. The baby might not even be yours. She uses insemination. Turkey baster with donor sperm. Check DNA. Please. She's dangerous. I'm sending proof to your email. Don't let her know you suspect. She has people. Be careful. I'm sorry I couldn't say this to your face. I'm just so scared for you. Cole read it twice, his heart rate steady despite the contents. He looked at Melissa, who was adjusting her hair in the small mirror beside the bed, humming softly. Everything okay? She asked, catching his eye in the reflection. Fine, he said. Just a work thing. He slipped the phone back into his pocket and sat down beside the bed, took her hand in his. Her pulse was rapid against his thumb. I love you, he said, watching her eyes. I love you too. The words came instantly, reflexively. Too fast. Like a recording. Cole smiled and squeezed her hand. Inside his jacket pocket, his phone buzzed twice more. Emails arriving. Proof, Courtney had said. He'd look at them soon. He'd examine every piece of evidence with a methodical precision that had made him one of Phoenix's most successful attorneys. But first, he'd play the role Melissa expected. The doting new father, the oblivious husband, the perfect mark. Because as he sat there holding the hand of a woman who might have been playing him for a fool, Cole Ewing felt something he hadn't experienced in years. The cold, clear certainty of purpose. If Melissa Barrett, or whoever she really was, thought she could destroy him the way she'd apparently destroyed Courtney's brother, she had severely miscalculated. Cole didn't lose. Not in court, not in life. And he certainly wouldn't lose to some con artist who'd picked the wrong target. The game was on. He just had to make sure she didn't realize she'd already lost. Chapter 2. The Architecture of Deception. Cole waited until midnight. Melissa slept fitfully beside him in the darkened hospital room, her breathing shallow and irregular. The baby, currently named Michael on the temporary paperwork, lay in the bassinet between them, swaddled tight and blissfully unaware of the fractures spreading through his parents' marriage before it had barely begun. The fluorescent glow from the parking lot filtered through the blinds, painting prison bar shadows across the walls. Cole sat in the uncomfortable recliner they'd called a father's bed, his phone screen dimmed to minimum brightness, and opened Courtney's emails. The first attachment was a newspaper article from Tampa, Florida, dated 5 years ago. The headline read, "Local businessman found dead in apparent suicide." The photograph showed a man in his 30s with Courtney's eyes, her brother, Daniel Osborne. Cole had never met him. Courtney had mentioned once that they'd been estranged, something about a bad relationship and family tensions. Now he knew why they'd been estranged. Daniel hadn't wanted to admit he was being destroyed. The article was brief. Daniel Osborne, 34, found dead from carbon monoxide poisoning in his garage. He'd been embroiled in a bitter divorce with his wife, Marina Osborne, née Barrett. The divorce proceedings had been contentious, with allegations of fraud and identity theft. Police had investigated, but found no evidence of foul play in his death. Marina Barrett, MB, Melissa Barrett. The second email contained more articles, these harder to find, from smaller publications and public records Courtney must have spent months compiling. Each told a variation of the same story. Tampa, 5 years ago, Marina Barrett married Daniel Osborne after a whirlwind 6-month romance. She got pregnant immediately. Within 2 years, Daniel's business accounts were emptied, his assets mysteriously transferred, his reputation destroyed by carefully planted rumors of embezzlement and domestic violence. The divorce papers were filed 2 weeks before his death. Marina disappeared shortly after the divorce settlement in her favor despite Daniel's allegations. The baby was never found in records, likely never existed, or was given up immediately for cash. Sacramento, 8 years ago, Margaret Brennan married Robert Shun, a software engineer with considerable stock options. Same pattern. Quick romance, pregnancy, systematic financial destruction, divorce, suicide. This time, Chun survived the attempt, but never recovered mentally. Margaret Brennan vanished with a settlement worth $2.3 million. Chicago, 11 years ago, Michelle Barrett married James McAllister. This time, she varied the pattern. No pregnancy, just marriage and financial manipulation. McAllister figured it out faster than the others and went to the police. The detective who investigated was named in the file, Morris Steele. His notes were included in Courtney's package, marked case closed, insufficient evidence. But Steele had added a handwritten note. Subject displayed sociopathic markers. Highly organized, patient, convincing. Network suspected, but not confirmed. Would not be surprised to see pattern repeat. Subject is dangerous. The timestamp on that note was 10 years old. Cole's hands were steady as he scrolled, but his mind raced. The woman sleeping 5 feet away had systematically destroyed at least 3 men's lives, possibly more. She'd refined her technique over a decade, learning from each iteration how to be more careful, more thorough, more devastating. And somehow, she'd chosen him as her next target. The question was why. Cole had money, certainly. His salary as a senior appellate attorney was substantial, and he'd made smart investments over the years. But he wasn't wealthy enough to retire. There were richer marks in Phoenix, men with easier access to liquid assets. Unless his phone buzzed. Another text from Courtney. I found her because of the name. After Daniel died, I became obsessed. I tracked every Melissa Marina Michelle with last names starting with B, Barrett, Brennan, Blackwell. She always uses MB initials. When I heard you married someone named Melissa Matthews, I pulled her records. The background is fake, Cole. All of it. Whoever made her papers is very good. But I found a photo from Daniel's wedding. It's her. Same face, same mannerisms, same everything. I'm attaching it now. The photo came through. A wedding picture, bright and joyful. Daniel Osborne in a tux, grinning like a man who'd won the lottery. And beside him, in a white dress and veil, was Melissa. Younger, her hair a different color, but undeniably her. Same smile, same cheekbones, same way of tilting her head that had first attracted Cole at that charity fundraiser 18 months ago. He remembered that night with painful clarity now. The Phoenix Children's Hospital Gala, black tie, and old money, the kind of event he usually avoided. But a client had insisted, and Cole had gone, expecting a few hours of tedious networking. She'd been standing by the bar, elegant in emerald silk, looking both perfectly placed and slightly lost. They'd struck up a conversation about the overpriced art being auctioned. She'd been witty, sharp, self-deprecating. She told him she'd moved to Phoenix 6 months ago for work, something vague in nonprofit management. She'd recently ended a long relationship and wasn't looking for anything serious. The lie had been perfect because it contained the exact truth he'd wanted to hear. Their courtship had been his idea, or so he'd thought. Dinner dates that stretched into long conversations. Weekend hikes in the Superstition Mountains. She'd been patient, never pushing, letting him set the pace. It was only after 3 months that she'd stayed over. After 6 that they'd discussed moving in together. After 9 that she'd cried in his arms about wanting a family before it was too late. She was 36, her biological clock was ticking, but she understood if he wasn't ready. He proposed a week later. Looking back through the lens of Courtney's evidence, every moment recalibrated into something sinister. The way Melissa had accidentally met his business partners. Her casual questions about his investment portfolio. Her suggestion they consolidate accounts after the wedding for simplicity. Her insistence on traditional vows including financial unity. Her unexpected pregnancy exactly 3 weeks after their courthouse wedding. Fast enough to lock down the marriage, but not so fast it seemed suspicious. She'd played him like a Stradivarius, and he'd danced to every note. Or had he? Cole looked at the sleeping woman again. Something Courtney had said in her first frantic text nagged at him. She is people. This wasn't a solo operation. It couldn't be. The fake identification, the seamless background, the ability to disappear after each mark, that required resources, money, expertise, which meant Melissa wasn't the mastermind. She was the weapon. Someone else was pulling the strings. Cole opened a new text to Courtney. Don't contact me again unless I contact you first. Delete my number. If anyone asks, we exchanged pleasantries at the hospital, nothing more. Don't tell anyone what you told me. I need you to trust me on this. Can you do that? 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, yes. But please be careful. These people are dangerous. Daniel tried to fight back, and they, just please, Cole. Don't let them know you're onto them. I won't, he typed. Then added, and Courtney? Thank you. For Daniel's memory, and for this warning. I won't let it be in vain. He deleted the text thread, then created a new encrypted email account using protocols that would take even a sophisticated hacker weeks to trace. He forwarded all of Courtney's evidence to himself at this new address, then deleted the emails from his regular account and cleared every cache. By 2 a.m., he created 6 more secure email accounts and begun organizing the information into a structure he could work with. By 4 a.m., he drafted a preliminary strategy. When the sun rose and Melissa woke with a smile, asking him to hold the baby while she showered, Cole was ready. He took his son, because regardless of biology, this child was innocent and looked into eyes that might or might not be his. It's okay, he whispered to the sleeping infant. Daddy's got this. The baby yawned, utterly trusting. Cole just wished he knew exactly what this was going to require. Chapter 3. The Paper Trail. They brought Michael home on a Tuesday to the house Cole had bought 2 years ago, a Spanish colonial in Arcadia with good bones and a yard big enough for a dog he'd never had time to get. Melissa had redecorated after they'd married, replacing his minimalist furniture with warmer pieces, adding art to the walls, making the space feel like a home instead of a museum to his divorce. Now he looked at every change and wondered, was she feathering a nest or cataloging assets? You're quiet, Melissa said from the passenger seat, Michael's car seat secure behind them. Having second thoughts about being a father? Her tone was teasing, but Cole heard the probe beneath it. She was testing him, trying to gauge if Courtney's warning had taken root. Just tired, he lied smoothly, and thinking about work. I have a Morrison appeal next week. The case about the contract dispute? I thought you had that locked down. She remembered. Of course she did. Melissa had made a point of remembering everything about his work, his cases, his clients. He'd thought it was interest. Now he recognized it as reconnaissance. Nothing's ever locked down until the judges rule, he said, pulling into their driveway. The house looked serene in the afternoon light, bougainvillea blooming fuchsia against the adobe walls. But yes, I'm confident. Confidence was his natural state. Melissa had commented on it early in their relationship, how he moved through the world with absolute certainty. He'd explained it as the product of his childhood, a military father who demanded excellence, a mother who'd taught him that hesitation was weakness. Cole had learned young to project authority even when he felt none. That skill had never been more crucial than now. Inside, Melissa immediately began settling in, her movements practiced and efficient. She set up the bassinet in their bedroom, organized the diaper supplies, started a load of baby laundry. Cole watched her work, noting the way she avoided certain rooms, how her eyes flickered to his home office door. I need to check work emails, he said. Just for an hour. Can you handle? Of course. She smiled, already reaching for Michael. We'll be fine. Take your time. He closed the office door and heard the lock click, a habit Melissa had never questioned, accepting his explanation about client confidentiality. Now, he wondered if she tried to get in here while he was at work, what she might have been searching for. But Cole hadn't been careless. Long before Melissa entered his life, he'd been paranoid about security, occupational hazard of handling sensitive appeals. His computer required 3 forms of authentication to access. His files were encrypted. His safe was hidden behind a false panel in the closet, protected by a combination only he knew. What Melissa didn't know was that he'd also installed security cameras throughout the house 9 months ago, disguised as smoke detectors and decorative objects. He told her they were for home security. Really, they'd been insurance, a habit from his divorce, documentation against future disputes. That paranoia was about to pay off. Cole pulled up the camera feed from the past 6 months and began watching at 4x speed, looking for patterns. Days when he was at the courthouse or in depositions. Times when Melissa thought she was alone. It took 3 hours to find the first anomaly. 2 months ago, 2 p.m. on a Thursday, Cole had been in oral arguments downtown. The camera in the living room showed Melissa letting someone into the house, a man in his 40s, dressed in business casual, carrying a leather messenger bag. Cole froze the frame and zoomed in. The man's face was visible, sharp-featured with salt and pepper hair. He looked familiar in a way Cole couldn't immediately place. They talked for 20 minutes, the man occasionally gesturing to paperwork he'd spread across the coffee table. Melissa nodded, took notes, pointed to several documents. Then they disappeared into the kitchen, out of camera range, for another 15 minutes. When they emerged, the man left. Melissa immediately gathered all the papers and took them upstairs, to the guest bedroom they'd designated as the future nursery. The camera there had been disconnected a week earlier, Melissa claiming she'd accidentally unplugged it while measuring for curtains. Cole pulled up his calendar. That Thursday, he'd been arguing the Brennan case, a corporate dispute involving complex asset transfers. He'd won. Melissa had celebrated with him that night, making his favorite dinner, being affectionate and attentive. He thought she was proud of him. Now he realized she'd been celebrating something entirely different. Who was the man? Cole ran the frozen image through facial recognition software, a tool he used occasionally for jury investigation. Nothing came back from standard databases. But when he cross-referenced with business registries and limited liability companies, he got a hit. Devin Hood, listed as the managing partner of Sentinel Trust Services, a Nevada-based LLC that specialized in asset protection and estate planning. The company website was deliberately vague, filled with stock photos and generic promises. But when Cole dug deeper using the legal databases his law firm subscribed to, he found something interesting. Sentinel Trust Services have been named in 3 different civil suits over the past decade, each time as the entity that had legally received assets from men going through divorces. Each suit had been settled quietly, with NDAs attached. The plaintiffs' names didn't match any of the identities Courtney had uncovered, but the pattern was there. This was the infrastructure. Melissa was the hunter, but Devin Hood was the one who skinned the kill. Cole leaned back in his chair, his mind assembling the puzzle. The operation was more sophisticated than he'd initially thought. Melissa would seduce and marry the target. During the marriage, she'd slowly gather information, account numbers, passwords, vulnerabilities. Then Devin Hood would appear, likely posing as a financial advisor or estate planner. He'd set up trusts and transfers that looked legitimate, but were designed to drain assets the moment divorce proceedings began. The pregnancy added another layer. It established immediate standing for support and settlement claims. If the baby wasn't genetically the husband's, and DNA tests took time, she'd have months to complete the transfer while the mark was distracted by shock and betrayal. It was brilliant. Sociopathic, but brilliant. The question remained, who was behind it? Hood was a facilitator, Melissa was the weapon, but someone was choosing the targets and coordinating the operations. Someone who'd been doing this for over a decade without getting caught. Cole's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "You've been digging. Careful. We're watching." His blood went cold. He checked the number. Burner phone. Untraceable. He looked around the office, suddenly aware of his own security cameras. Had they been compromised? Or was this a bluff designed to scare him into tipping his hand? A soft knock at the door. "Cole? Michael's fussy. I think he wants his daddy." Melissa's voice, sweet and concerned. Cole deleted the text and took 3 slow breaths. "Coming," he called. He opened the door to find her standing there with their son, or the baby she claimed was their son, looking every inch the perfect wife and mother. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Everything okay?" she asked. "You look pale." "Just a migraine," Cole said, taking the baby. Michael immediately settled against his shoulder, tiny fist curling into Cole's shirt. Despite everything, despite all the uncertainty and betrayal, Cole felt a fierce surge of protective love for this child. "Why don't you lie down?" Melissa suggested. "I can handle the evening routine." "I'm fine," Cole said. "Actually, I was thinking we should celebrate. New family, new life." Let's have dinner out this weekend. Someplace nice. Your choice. The micro-expression that crossed her face was satisfaction, quickly masked. She thought he'd accepted his role, that the investigation had been nothing but paranoid exhaustion. That sounds perfect, she said. Saturday. Saturday, Cole agreed. He had 4 days to prepare. For days to turn the tables on people who'd been running this con for over a decade. 4 days to find out who was really behind this operation and make them all pay for what they'd done to Courtney's brother, to Robert Shun, to James McAllister, to however many other men have been destroyed by this machine. 4 days to become the hunter instead of the prey. As Melissa walked away, humming softly to herself, Cole looked down at the baby in his arms and made a silent promise. Whoever these people were, whatever they'd planned, they'd made one critical mistake. They'd chosen Cole Ewing as their mark, and Cole Ewing never lost. The game was about to change. They just didn't know it yet. Chapter 4. The Investigator. Morris Steele looked exactly like his name. Solid, gray, uncompromising. He sat across from Cole in a dim coffee shop in Mesa, far enough from Phoenix that chance encounters were unlikely. Retired from the Chicago PD 5 years ago, Steele now ran a private investigation firm that specialized in cases the police couldn't or wouldn't touch. Cole had found him through the case files Courtney had sent. The James McAllister investigation, 10 years old, but never closed in Steele's mind. The detective had included personal notes suggesting he'd continued tracking the suspect informally, convinced she was part of a larger criminal enterprise. You're the 4th person to contact me about her, Steele said, stirring his black coffee with mechanical precision. The other 3 are dead. Cole didn't flinch. Suicide? Officially? 2 suicides, 1 accidental overdose. Unofficially, Steele's gray eyes were flat and cold. Murder dressed up nice and legal. These people are professionals, Mr. Ewing. They don't leave evidence. They don't make mistakes. And they have resources that suggest someone with serious money and connections is running the show. Then why are you here? Why risk talking to me? Because I'm old, I'm sick, stage 3 lung cancer, don't bother offering condolences, and I'm tired of watching good men get destroyed while the people responsible walk away clean. Steele leaned forward. McAllister was a friend, a good man. He came to me for help, and I failed him. I've been tracking this operation ever since, off the books on my own time. I have information that could help you. Question is, what are you planning to do with it? Cole considered his answer carefully. Steele had cop written all over him, even retired. The wrong response could end this conversation immediately. I want justice, Cole said. Legal justice if possible. But I'm not naive enough to think the law always works. These people have been operating for over a decade, multiple jurisdictions, and they're still free. So my priority is protecting myself and exposing them. Whatever that takes. Steele studied him for a long moment. You're a lawyer. Appellate attorney, from what I read. Smart, successful, good reputation. You fight clean in court. I fight to win, Cole corrected. Clean or dirty depends on the opponent. Fair enough. Steele pulled a thin folder from his jacket. I'm giving you this because I think you might actually have chance. You're careful, you're intelligent, and most importantly, you're not in love with her anymore. The others were still emotionally compromised. Made them sloppy. Cole accepted the folder, but didn't open it yet. What's in here? Everything I could find on the organization. It's not complete. These people are ghosts, but it's a start. The woman you know as Melissa is just the tip. There are at least 3 other female operatives working the same con in different cities. The man coordinating it is Devin Hood, but he's not the top. He answers to someone else, someone I haven't been able to identify. I know about Hood, Cole said. He came to my house 2 months ago. Steele's eyebrows rose fractionally, the only expression he'd shown. That's further along than I thought. He usually doesn't appear until after the pregnancy is confirmed. They must have accelerated their timeline on you. Why would they do that? Either they're getting bolder, or they think you're an easy mark. Steele's smile was grim. I'm betting on the latter. You were divorced, ready to move on, successful enough to be worth the effort, but not so wealthy you'd have sophisticated security. Perfect target. Cole opened the folder. Inside were surveillance photos, financial records, interconnected diagrams mapping out the organization structure. At the center was a blank spot labeled the architect. That's who we need, Steele said, tapping the blank space. The person running this whole operation. They're the brains, the money, the protection. Cut off the head and the whole thing collapses. Any leads on who they might be? One. But it's thin. Steele pulled out a single sheet of paper. All the financial transactions eventually route through a series of shell corporations in Delaware and the Cayman Islands. I managed to trace them back to a legal firm in New York, Whitehead and Associates. They specialize in privacy protection for high net worth individuals. I contacted them pretending to be a potential client. Got the runaround for weeks. But I noticed something. Every time I pushed about who owned Sentinel Trust Services, I got transferred to the same person. A lawyer named Wilfred Whitehead. Not just any lawyer, the senior partner. So Whitehead is the architect. Maybe. Or maybe he's just another layer of protection. But here's the interesting part. Whitehead's firm has been around for 30 years. They've represented some seriously sketchy clients over the years. Organized crime figures, corrupt politicians, corporate fraudsters. Always skirting the line, but never quite crossing it. If anyone could design a con this sophisticated and keep it running this long, it'd be someone like him. Cole studied Whitehead's photo, attached to a business profile from a law journal. The man was in his 60s, distinguished looking with white hair and sharp features. He looked like everyone's idea of a trustworthy attorney, which probably meant he was anything but. I need to make a request, Cole said carefully. Can you give me more information on Whitehead? Personal details, vulnerabilities, anything that might give me leverage? I can try. But Mr. Ewing, understand what you're asking. If Whitehead is running this operation, he has the resources to make problems disappear. You come at him directly, you better not miss. I won't miss, Cole said with quiet certainty. But I need to be smart about it. These people think I'm just another mark. I want to keep them thinking that as long as possible. Steele nodded slowly. How much does your wife suspect? Nothing, as far as I can tell. I'm playing the role perfectly. Devoted husband, overwhelmed new father, completely oblivious. Good. Keep it that way. The moment she realizes you're onto her, she'll activate whatever endgame they have planned. Could be violence, could be legal traps, could be both. These people are ruthless. They talked for another hour, Steele sharing 10 years of accumulated knowledge. By the time they parted ways, Cole had a much clearer picture of what he was facing. The organization had been operating for at least 15 years, possibly longer. They targeted successful but emotionally vulnerable men, usually divorced or recently out of bad relationships. They'd refined their technique over time, learning from mistakes, adapting to new obstacles. The fake pregnancies, the identity changes, the financial infrastructure, it was all designed to maximize profit while minimizing risk. And they'd gotten away with it because their victims either died or were too destroyed to fight back. The ones who survived were bankrupted, broken men with no credibility and no resources. Who would believe them over a tearful pregnant wife claiming abuse? Cole drove home in silence, his mind working through scenarios. He needed more than just knowledge. He needed proof that would stand up in court. He needed to document everything without tipping his hand. And most importantly, he needed to identify the architect, because Steele was right about one thing: cut off the head and the body dies. When he arrived home, Melissa was in the nursery with Michael, singing a lullaby. Her voice was actually quite beautiful. Cole stood in the doorway, watching this woman who'd systematically planned his destruction rock a baby that might not even be his biological child. She looked up and smiled. He's finally asleep. I think he's starting to recognize us. Good, Cole said, moving to her side. He put his arm around her shoulders, felt her lean into him. The performance was flawless on both sides. I was thinking, Melissa said softly, maybe we should start looking at bigger houses. This place is nice, but with the baby, we'll need more space. And if we want more children. She let the suggestion hang. More children, more anchors, more legal complications to prevent him from leaving or protecting his assets. Let's wait until we're settled with Michael, Cole said. One thing at a time. He felt her stiffen slightly, disappointment or annoyance, quickly masked. Of course. You're right. I'm just excited about our future. Our future. The future where she took everything he'd built and left him destroyed like Courtney's brother. Me too, Cole lied, kissing the top of her head. That night, while Melissa slept beside him and Michael's breathing whispered from the bassinet, Cole made a decision. He would dismantle this organization piece by piece. He would expose every crime, every victim, every detail of their operation. He would make sure Devin Hood, Wilfred Whitehead, and especially Melissa paid for every life they destroyed. But he wouldn't do it through the legal system alone. The law was too slow, too easily manipulated by people with resources and connections. No, Cole would fight this battle on multiple fronts: legal, financial, and personal. He'd learned something important in 15 years of appellate work. The most devastating victories weren't the ones where you proved your opponent wrong. They were the ones where you made your opponent destroy themselves. And Cole had just the plan to make that happen. Chapter 5. The Double Agent. Cole found Courtney in the hospital cafeteria 3 days later during her lunch break. She looked up from her salad with fear in her eyes, glancing around as if expecting attackers to materialize. "You shouldn't be here," she hissed. "If they see us together." "Relax," Cole said, sitting down. To any observer, they were just former spouses having a civil conversation. "I've been careful. No one followed me. And I swept my car for tracking devices this morning." "You what?" Courtney stared at him. "Cole, what are you?" "I need your help," he said quietly. "And before you say no, hear me out. These people destroyed your brother. They're planning to destroy me. And there are probably dozens of other men out there who've suffered the same fate. We can stop them, but I need someone on the inside. Someone they don't know is working against them." Courtney's hand shook as she put down her fork. "I can't. I'm terrified just talking to you. These people, Cole, you don't understand what they're capable of." Daniel tried to fight back. He documented everything, went to lawyers, filed complaints. And then suddenly his evidence disappeared, witnesses recanted, and he was facing criminal charges for fraud. They flipped his whole case against him. He couldn't take it. The shame, the financial ruin, knowing they'd won. He gave up. "I know," Cole said gently. "And I'm sorry. But Daniel didn't have what we have." "What's that?" "Knowledge, evidence, and most importantly, the element of surprise." He leaned forward. "They think I'm already beaten, Courtney. They think I'm the same as Daniel, as Robert Shun, as all the others. But I'm not. I'm a lawyer who spent 15 years finding loopholes in seemingly airtight cases. I'm a strategist who's made a career out of overturning convictions. And I'm angry. Anger won't protect you from these people. No, but intelligence will. That's why I need you." He pulled out a prepaid phone, one of 6 he'd bought with cash that morning. "I want you to make contact with them." Courtney's eyes widened. "Are you insane? Hear me out. You're Daniel's sister. You have every reason to hate Melissa for what she did to him. If you approach them, maybe through the police, asking for information about your brother's case, it would seem natural, especially if you seemed vulnerable, grief-stricken, maybe drinking too much, making bad decisions." Understanding dawned on Court. Nay's face. "You want me to be bait. I want you to be a Trojan horse. They'll see a wounded family member who might cause problems. Devin Hood might reach out to contain the situation, money, threats, whatever their standard protocol is. And when he does, we'll record everything. Document their methods. Get them on tape making threats or offering bribes. That's entrapment. Entrapment requires a law enforcement officer. You're a civilian, and you have every legal right to record conversations in Arizona. It's a one-party consent state." Cole pushed the phone across the table. "This phone is encrypted and has recording capabilities. All calls are automatically backed up to a secure cloud server. If they contact you, if they threaten you, we'll have proof." Courtney stared at the phone like it might bite her. "And if they don't just threaten? If they decide I'm too dangerous and need to be eliminated like Daniel? Then you contact me immediately and we go to the FBI with everything we have. It's not ideal. I'd rather have more evidence, but it's better than nothing. I won't let you get hurt, Courtney. I promise." "Your promises didn't keep our marriage together," she said bitterly, then immediately looked ashamed. "I'm sorry. That was uncalled for. No, it's fair. I wasn't a good husband. I was too focused on work, on winning, on my own ambitions. I took you for granted. Cole met her eyes. But I never lied to you. I never tried to destroy you. And I'm asking you now to believe that I'll protect you better than I did when we were married. Courtney picked up the phone, turning it over in her hands. What do I actually do? File a request with the Tampa Police Department for your brother's case files. Make it official but emotional. Mention that the anniversary of his death is coming up. You're struggling with closure. You think you might lawyer up and sue Melissa for wrongful death. Make yourself a problem they can't ignore. And when they come, act vulnerable but determined. Let them think they can manipulate you. Record everything. And stay in public places whenever possible. Cole handed her a business card. This is Morris Steele, a retired detective who's been tracking this organization for years. If you feel unsafe at any time, call him. He'll extract you. This is crazy. Yes, Cole agreed. But it's also our best shot. These people are pros, Courtney. They've been doing this for years without getting caught. We need to think like them, anticipate their moves. And that means using their own tactics against them. Courtney was quiet for a long moment. Then, Daniel would want me to do this. He'd want someone to stop them. Then help me stop them. She nodded slowly. Okay, but Cole, when this is over, no matter how it ends, I don't want to see you again. I need a clean break from all of this. From my past, from my mistakes, from everything. Fair enough, Cole said, standing. Thank you, Courtney. For Daniel, and for me. He left without another word, aware that security cameras were tracking his every move. Let them see a civil conversation between exes. Nothing suspicious. Nothing to worry about. The trap was being baited. Now he just needed to spring it at exactly the right moment. The next morning, Cole made a show of working from home, telling Melissa he needed to focus on the Morrison appeal without office distractions. Really, he was monitoring communications from Morris Steele and preparing for phase 2 of his plan. Steele had come through with additional information on Wilfred Whitehead. The lawyer maintained a carefully cultivated public image, charity work, bar association leadership, prestigious clients. But dig deeper and cracks appeared. 3 former associates had left his firm under mysterious circumstances. 2 ex-wives had signed unusually aggressive NDAs. And his financial records, as much as Steele could access, showed irregular patterns consistent with money laundering. More interesting was Whitehead's son, Tobias Whitehead, 41, who'd been disbarred in California 8 years ago for misappropriating client funds. Tobias had spent 2 years in minimum security prison, then disappeared from public records. No employment history, no known residence, no social media presence. But Steele had found him anyway. Tobias was living in Las Vegas under the name Tobias Russo, working as a consultant for high-end casinos. His specialty? Identifying wealthy marks with gambling problems and facilitating their descent into debt. The pattern was unmistakable. Wilfred Whitehead had built a criminal enterprise, and his son was part of the operation. Cole was staring at Tobias's photo when his phone rang. Unknown number. Mr. Ewing? The voice was smooth, professional male. This is Devin Hood. I believe we met briefly at your home a few months ago. I'm the estate planner who consulted with your wife. Cole's pulse spiked, but his voice stayed calm. I remember. Is there a problem? Not at all. Actually, I was hoping we could schedule a follow-up meeting. Now that your son has arrived, there are some additional considerations for estate planning we should discuss. Asset protection trusts, life insurance policies, that sort of thing. Melissa handles most of that, Cole said carefully. But I suppose we should sit down together at some point. Excellent. How about this Saturday? I'm flying into Phoenix for a few consultations. We could meet at your home, or if you prefer, there's a lovely restaurant downtown, the Compass Room. Very private, excellent for sensitive discussions. The Compass Room was one of Phoenix's most expensive restaurants, the kind of place where power brokers made deals. Hood was signaling his class, his legitimacy, but he was also suggesting neutral territory, which meant he wanted to assess Cole directly away from Melissa's influence. Saturday works, Cole said. The Compass Room sounds perfect. 7 p.m. 7 is ideal. I'll make reservations under my name. Looking forward to our discussion, Mr. Ewing. The line went dead. Cole sat very still, his mind racing. Hood had made contact directly, which meant they were moving to the next phase. But why now? Why push forward so quickly? Unless someone had spooked them. Unless they knew Cole was investigating. Or unless Courtney had already made her move and they were responding. He checked his secure email. Sure enough, there was a message from the prepaid phone he'd given Courtney. Filed a request this morning. Tampa PD responded within 2 hours. Way too fast for normal bureaucracy. They're watching. We'll update if I hear anything. So the organization had monitoring systems in place, tracking requests related to their victims. Sophisticated, expensive, and potentially dangerous. Cole forwarded Courtney's message to Steele with a simple addition. Hood contacted me. Meeting Saturday. Need backup surveillance. Steele's response came within minutes. I'll handle it. Don't go alone. But Cole had no intention of bringing backup to the restaurant. He needed Hood to feel secure, to believe this was just another sheep being led to slaughter. What Hood didn't know was that Cole had already arranged his own surveillance. He'd hired a private security firm, not telling them the full story, just that he needed protection during a sensitive business meeting. They'd have people in the restaurant, cameras recording, and most importantly, armed professionals ready to intervene if things went sideways. Cole didn't plan to let things get that far. But having insurance was never a bad idea. Saturday couldn't come fast enough. Chapter 6. The Offer. The Compass Room occupied the top floor of a downtown Phoenix high-rise. All floor-to-ceiling windows and pretentious minimalism. Cole arrived 15 minutes early, dressed in his best suit. Navy Tom Ford, crisp white shirt, silk tie. The uniform of success, of confidence, of a man who belonged in rooms like this. The security detail he'd hired were already in position. 2 at the bar looking like businessmen having after-work drinks. 1 near the elevator posing as a late diner. The 4th was in a surveillance van parked across the street, monitoring video and audio feed from the micro cameras and recording devices Cole wore. Devin Hood arrived exactly on time, a man who clearly valued punctuality as a power move. He was taller than he'd appeared in the security footage, well-dressed, but not flashy, with the kind of face that could blend into any boardroom or country club. They shook hands. Hood's grip was firm, but not aggressive. Thank you for meeting me on short notice, Hood said as they were seated at a corner table with a spectacular view of the city lights. I know new fatherhood is demanding. It has its moments, Cole said easily, though Melissa is handling most of the heavy lifting. I'm mostly there for moral support and diaper changes. Hood smiled. The traditional division of labor. Very wise to let the mother bond first. Studies show it's crucial for infant development. The waiter appeared. They ordered drinks, scotch for Hood, bourbon for Cole. Then appetizers neither would probably eat. The ritual of expensive dining, establishing status and civility before discussing business. So, Cole said once they were alone, what specific concerns did you want to address? Melissa seemed satisfied with the planning we'd already done. And she should be. Your wife is very thorough. Hood's smile didn't reach his eyes. But there are always additional layers of protection to consider. For instance, have you thought about transferring some assets into an irrevocable trust? It's an excellent way to shield wealth from potential litigation, estate taxes, and other threats. What kind of threats? Oh, the usual. Lawsuits, creditors, business disputes. In your profession, appellate law, you must make enemies. Clients who feel you didn't fight hard enough. Opposing counsel who take things personally. It's surprisingly easy for a successful man to find himself on the wrong end of a frivolous lawsuit. Cole sipped his bourbon, letting the silence stretch. A negotiation tactic. People rush to fill silence, often revealing more than they intended. Hood continued. An irrevocable trust would protect your assets while allowing Melissa and your son to access them if something happened to you. It's really about family security. And who would manage this trust? Sentinel Trust Services, of course. We specialize in these arrangements. Very discreet, very secure. We have clients all over the country who trust us with their most sensitive assets. I'm sure you do, Cole said. But I prefer to keep my assets under direct control. Call it a personality flaw, but I don't like the idea of someone else managing my money. Hood's smile tightened fractionally. I understand the hesitation. But consider this. If you were to become incapacitated or, God forbid, pass away unexpectedly, who would manage your estate? Your wife is wonderful, but does she have the financial expertise to handle complex investments, tax planning, legal compliance? A trust ensures professional management regardless of circumstances. There it was, the hook disguised as concern. Transfer your assets to our control for protection, and when the marriage collapses, we already have legal possession. Clean, efficient, devastating. I appreciate the concern, Cole said, but I have comprehensive insurance, and my firm has established protocols for these situations. I think we're covered. Hood's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his posture. Calculation. Reassessment. Of course, he said smoothly. I wouldn't want to pressure you into anything, but perhaps we could discuss life insurance? You have a policy, I assume. Standard term life through my firm. $2 million. That's a start, but hardly sufficient for a man of your means. Your annual income alone is what? $350,000? Plus bonuses and investments. If something happened to you, your family will be financially devastated within years. I'd recommend a minimum of $5 million in coverage, possibly more. And I suppose Sentinel Trust Services offers life insurance. We have partnerships with several excellent carriers. I could have proposals drawn up by Monday. Cole smiled. You're very persistent, Mr. Hood. I'm thorough, Hood corrected. My client's security is my top priority. I've been doing this for 15 years, Mr. Ewing. I've seen too many families destroyed by inadequate planning. I'd hate to see that happen to yours. There was the threat, wrapped in professional concern. Do what we want, or we'll destroy your family anyway. Cole set down his glass. Let me ask you something, Devin. How many of your clients' marriages end in divorce? Hood blinked. I'm not sure I understand the question. It's simple. You specialize in asset protection for married men. I'm wondering what percentage of those men end up divorced within a few years of setting up their trusts. I don't track that specific metric, but because I've been doing some research, Cole continued, his voice still friendly but colder now. And I've noticed a pattern. Men who use Sentinel Trust Services seem to have an unusually high divorce rate, almost like the trusts themselves create marital problems. Hood's face was perfectly neutral, but his eyes had gone flat and dangerous. That's an interesting theory, but correlation doesn't imply causation. Men who seek asset protection often have complex situations that, like Daniel Osborne, Cole said quietly. The name hit Hood like a physical blow. For just a second, his mask slipped. Surprise, anger, calculation racing across his features before control reasserted itself. I don't know who that is, Hood said. Really? Because Daniel Osborne used your services 5 years ago in Tampa. Set up an irrevocable trust right after his wife got pregnant. Then she filed for divorce, took everything, and Daniel killed himself. You don't remember him? Hood stood abruptly. I think this meeting is over. Sit down, Devin. The command in Cole's voice froze Hood mid-step. Cole hadn't raised his voice, hadn't moved, but suddenly the dynamic in the room had shifted. The sheep had become a wolf. You're going to sit down, Cole continued calmly, and you're going to listen very carefully, because I'm about to make you an offer that will determine whether you spend the next 20 years in federal prison or walk away from this conversation a free man. Hood stood frozen for 3 heartbeats. Then, slowly he sat. You're recording this, Hood said flatly. Obviously, video and audio uploaded in real time to secure servers, plus witnesses scattered throughout this restaurant. So let's skip the denials and threats. I know what you are. I know what you do. I know about the organization you work for. And most importantly, I know you're not the one running it. I don't know what you're talking about. Wilford Whitehead, Cole said. Senior partner at Whitehead and Associates in New York. That's who you answer to, isn't it? He's the architect. You're just the facilitator. Hood's expression remained neutral, but his hands had tightened on the table edge, knuckles white. Cole leaned forward. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to tell me everything about the organization, how it works, who's involved, how many victims there are. You're going to provide evidence, documents, communications, financial records, everything. And if I refuse, then I go to the FBI with what I already have. It's not enough to convict Whitehead, but it's more than enough to destroy you. Conspiracy to commit fraud, witness intimidation, possibly accessory to murder if I can prove you were involved in Daniel Osborne's death. You'll spend the rest of your life in prison. You have nothing, Hood said, but his voice lacked conviction. I have Daniel Osborne's widow, my ex-wife's sister-in-law. I have her testimony about how you targeted her husband, how the money moved, how Daniel was driven to suicide. I have financial records showing the pattern of asset transfers. I have security footage of you meeting with my wife to plan my destruction. And most importantly, I have this conversation where you didn't deny a single thing I accused you of. Hood was silent, his mind clearly racing through options. But here's the thing, Cole continued. I don't actually want you, Devin. You're a facilitator, a tool. The person I want is Whitehead, and you're going to help me get him. Why would I do that? Because I'm offering you immunity. Full cooperation with federal prosecutors, witness protection if needed, and a chance to walk away from this instead of dying in prison. All you have to do is turn on your boss. Whitehead will kill me. Whitehead will be too busy defending himself to come after you. I'm going to destroy him, Devin. Completely and utterly. I'm going to expose every crime, every victim, every dollar he's stolen. I'm going to make sure he spends the rest of his life in a cage. The only question is whether you're standing beside him or testifying against him. Hood stared at Cole for a long moment. You're not what we thought you were. No, Cole agreed. I'm not. But you people made a critical error. You targeted a lawyer who spent his entire career finding ways to overturn seemingly unbeatable cases. Did you really think I wouldn't figure this out? Melissa said you were. Broken? Vulnerable? Easy. Cole's smile was cold. That's what I wanted her to think. Every step of this relationship, I was documenting and verifying. When your operation started moving too fast, I knew something was wrong. And once my ex-wife warned me, I had everything I needed to start building my case. Does Melissa know? Not yet. And she won't until I'm ready to spring the trap. Right now, she thinks she's still running the con. Let her keep thinking that. Hood was quiet again, clearly weighing his options. Finally, if I cooperate, I want full immunity. And protection. Whitehead has reach. You'll get it. But I need everything, Devin. Names, dates, financial records, recordings if you have them. I need enough evidence to bury Whitehead so deep he never sees daylight again. I can do that, Hood said slowly. But understand something. Whitehead isn't just running a con. He's connected, political connections, law enforcement connections, money connections. Even with evidence, taking him down won't be easy. Nothing worth doing ever is, Cole said. He pulled out a business card, his real one, from his law firm. You have 48 hours to decide. Call me, and we'll arrange a meeting with federal prosecutors. Don't call me, and I turn everything over to the FBI and let them sort out. Your choice. He stood, dropped $300 bills on the table, more than enough to cover the meal they hadn't eaten, and walked out without looking back. Behind him, Devin Hood sat frozen, staring at the business card, the weight of his decision pressing down like a physical thing. Cole didn't wait for the elevator. He took the stairs, adrenaline pumping, mind sharp and clear. The first domino had fallen. Now he just needed to topple the rest before they realized what was happening. His phone buzzed. A text from a surveillance team. Multiple people photographed Hood during a meeting. They may have backup outside. Recommend alternative exit. Cole texted back, stay with Hood. I want to know where he goes and who he contacts. He exited through the kitchen. A hefty tip to the manager bought his discretion and caught an Uber 3 blocks away. The driver didn't ask why a man in a $3,000 suit was climbing into his Honda Civic from a back alley. By the time Cole got home, it was past 11. Melissa was in bed, reading on her phone. Michael slept peacefully in his bassinet. How was dinner? She asked, looking up with a smile that would have fooled anyone who didn't know better. Productive, Cole said, loosening his tie. Devin Hood sends his regards. We discussed some additional planning for Michael's future. That's wonderful, Melissa said. I've been telling you we need better estate protection. You have, Cole agreed. He kissed her forehead, another performance in their ongoing play. I'm going to shower and then check some case files. Don't wait up. In the shower, with water pounding and white noise covering any potential listening devices, Cole allowed himself a brief moment of satisfaction. The trap was set. He would either take the deal or try to run. Either way, Cole would be ready. And when it was all over, when every person involved in this criminal enterprise was exposed and punished, Cole would make sure Melissa understood exactly what she'd lost by choosing him as her target. He wasn't prey. He was a predator who'd been patiently waiting for his enemies to reveal themselves. And now the hunt was truly beginning. Chapter 7. The Collapse. Devin Hood called 36 hours later, his voice tight with fear. "I'm in, but we need to move fast. Whitehead suspects something. He's been calling me constantly, asking about our meeting. I think he has someone watching me." Cole was in his office, door locked, secure line active. "Where are you now?" "A hotel in Tempe. I checked in under a false name. But I don't know how long I have before." A sound in the background, something crashing. Hood's breathing became rapid. "Shit, someone's at the door." "There." The line went dead. Cole immediately called more Steele. "Hood's location now. He's at a hotel in Tempe, but someone just—" "I'm already on it," Steele interrupted. "I had a tracker on his phone. Sending you the address. He's at the Desert Star Inn, room 237. I'm 15 minutes out. If you're going, move now." Cole was already grabbing his keys. "I'm not letting them eliminate our only witness." He made it to the Desert Star Inn in 12 minutes, breaking every traffic law. The motel was low rent, the kind of place where no one asked questions and cameras mysteriously malfunctioned. Hood's rental car was still in the lot, but the door to room 237 stood open. Cole approached carefully, using skills he'd learned his father's military household. Slow, methodical, aware of his surroundings. The room had been tossed. Lamp broken, mattress overturned, Hood's luggage emptied across the floor. And in the bathroom, Devin Hood lay unconscious, alive, but badly beaten, blood pooling from a head wound. Cole checked for a pulse. Strong and steady. Hood groaned, his eyes fluttering. "Stay still," Cole said, pulling out his phone to call 911. But Hood's hand shot out, grabbing his wrist with surprising strength. "No police," Hood rasped. "Whitehead has people inside. Phoenix PD. They'll finish what they started. You need medical attention. I need protection." Hood's eyes focused, sharp despite the beating. "I was stupid. Told my assistant about our meeting. She must have reported to Whitehead. They came to silence me. But I got the files out first." "What files?" "Everything. Names, victims, financial records, recordings. It's all in a storage unit." Hood rattled off an address. "Unit 347. Combination is 8-4-7-2. Get it before they do." Morris Steele appeared in the doorway, taking in the scene with a cop's practiced eye. "Damn, they moved faster than I expected." Between them, they got Hood to Steele's car and to a private clinic Steele knew, a place that treated police informants and witnesses who couldn't risk official hospitals. The doctor there was discreet and asked no questions. While Hood was being patched up, Cole and Steele drove to the storage facility. It was after midnight, the place deserted except for security lights and cameras. Cole had no doubt those cameras were being monitored, but he didn't care anymore. Hood's beating had changed the calculation. This was no longer about careful planning. It was about moving faster than Whitehead could respond. Unit 347 was in the back corner, climate-controlled and expensive. Cole entered the combination Hood had given him. The lock clicked open. Inside were 4 filing boxes and a laptop. Cole grabbed the laptop while Steele loaded the boxes into his trunk. They were back on the road within 3 minutes. "We need somewhere secure," Steele said. "Whitehead knows about your house, my office, probably anywhere else we might normally go." "I know a place," Cole said. He directed Steele to a law office in Scottsdale, belonging to Benjamin Young, a colleague from Cole's firm who specialized in criminal defense. Young was a close friend, and more importantly, he had a SC Chef, a sensitive compartmented information facility, built into his office for handling classified government contracts. It was one of the most secure locations in Phoenix outside of federal buildings. Young met them at 2 a.m., asking no questions when Cole explained they needed the SCAF for a few hours. Within 15 minutes, they were sealed inside a room specifically designed to prevent any electronic surveillance. Cole opened Hood's laptop. No password. He'd clearly prepared it for exactly this scenario. The files were organized with meticulous care. Spreadsheets tracking every victim over 15 years. Audio recordings of Hood's conversations with Whitehead. Financial records showing exactly how money moved through the Shell Corporation network. And most damning of all, contracts. Actual written contracts between Whitehead and Associates and the female operatives, laying out terms of employment, performance bonuses based on asset acquisition, and liability waivers. It was staggering in its audacity. A criminal enterprise run like a legitimate business, complete with HR policies and employment agreements. This is enough, Steele said, scrolling through files. This is more than enough to bury Whitehead and everyone else involved. There's more, Cole said, opening a folder labeled Insurance. Inside were videos, security footage from various locations showing the female operatives with different men, discussing strategies, even laughing about their marks. One video showed Melissa at what appeared to be a training session, listening to Wilfred Whitehead himself explain the psychological technique for building trust and manipulating targets. Cole watched himself being dissected as a case study. Whitehead's voice, cultured and clinical. Cole Ewing represents an ideal Mark profile. Divorced, successful, emotionally guarded, but craving connection. His need for control makes him predictable. Appeal to his protective instincts, show vulnerability, let him feel like he's saving you. Men like this always fall the hardest because they think they're too smart to be fooled. The casual cruelty of it, the calculated manipulation, made Cole's blood run cold. But he kept watching, documenting everything. By 4 a.m., they had a complete picture of the organization. 17 female operatives working in 8 states. 43 confirmed victims over 15 years, estimated total theft exceeding $50 million, and at least 4 probable murders disguised as suicides. We take this to the FBI, Steele said. Not yet, Cole said. This evidence gets Whitehead. But I want everyone, every operative, every facilitator, every corrupt cop or lawyer who helped them. If we move too fast, some of them will slip through the cracks. So what do you want to do? I want to use myself as bait one more time. Let them think they've still got the upper hand. Let them make one final move to silence me and Hood. And when they do, we'll have them all. That's incredibly dangerous. Yes, Cole agreed. But it's the only way to be sure we get everyone. He pulled out his phone and sent a text to a number he'd memorized but never called. Melissa's burner phone, the one she didn't know he discovered hidden in her purse. The text was simple. I know everything. Meet me at the house at noon today. Come alone, or I release the files. He didn't expect her to come alone. He didn't expect her to negotiate. He expected her to panic, to contact Whitehead, to trigger whatever endgame protocol they had for situations like this. And when they came for him with everything they had, the FBI would be waiting. Cole had spent the morning preparing. Every room in the house now had cameras and recording equipment installed by a team Steele had brought in. Not cops, but retired federal agents who specialized in witness protection and sting operations. They'd wired the entire property for sound and video, with live feeds going to multiple secure locations and directly to an FBI task force that Steele had finally contacted. The FBI had been surprisingly eager to help once they saw Hood's evidence. Apparently, Whitehead had been on their radar for years, but they'd never been able to gather sufficient proof. Now, they had everything, and the chance to catch him in the act of witness intimidation or worse. Special Agent Lilia Francis was running the operation, a 20-year veteran of the Bureau's white-collar crime division. She sat in the surveillance van outside Cole's house, coordinating with teams positioned around the neighborhood. Mr. Ewing, she'd said when they met that morning, her dark eyes serious. I need to be very clear about the risks. If Whitehead feels cornered, he may order your elimination. We'll have agents close by, but response time is never zero. Are you certain you want to do this? I'm certain, Cole had said. These people destroyed lives. They need to answer for it. Now it was 11:45 a.m., and Cole sat in his living room with Michael sleeping in his arms. Melissa had left early that morning, claiming she needed to do some shopping. She'd been tense, distracted, clearly receiving updates about Devin Hood's disappearance and the missing files. At 11:55, a car pulled into the driveway. Not Melissa's BMW, but a black Lincoln Town car with tinted windows. Professional, expensive, intimidating. 3 people got out. Melissa, looking pale and frightened. Devin Hood, conscious now but clearly still injured, moving stiffly. And a third person Cole had only seen in photographs, Wilfred Whitehead himself. The architect had come to handle the situation personally. Cole carefully placed Michael in his playpen, making sure the baby was out of any potential line of fire, then walked to the front door and opened it before they could knock. "Wilfred Whitehead," he said calmly, "I wasn't expecting you to make a personal appearance." Whitehead was exactly as imposing as his reputation suggested. 6 feet tall, perfectly tailored suit, silver hair immaculate, eyes cold and calculating. When he spoke, his voice was cultured, almost grandfatherly. "Mr. Ewing, may we come in? I believe we have some matters to discuss." By all means, Cole stepped aside, letting them enter. Melissa wouldn't meet his eyes. It looked like he wanted to bolt, but didn't dare. They settled in the living room. Whitehead in Cole's favorite chair, Melissa on the couch, Hood standing nervously by the door. Cole remained standing, maintaining the strategic advantage of movement. "You've made things very complicated, Mr. Ewing," Whitehead said. "I'll admit, I underestimated you. That doesn't happen often. I'll take that as a compliment. It's not intended as one. You've stolen property that belongs to me. Files, recordings, confidential business documents. I'm here to negotiate their return." "Negotiate?" Cole let skepticism color his voice. "With what leverage? I have everything I need to destroy your organization. Names, faces, victims, financial records. The FBI could roll up your entire operation by dinner time." "Perhaps," Whitehead conceded, "but you haven't gone to them yet, which tells me you're willing to make a deal." "I wouldn't call it a deal." "Then what would you call it?" Cole smiled coldly. "Complete surrender. You shut down your operation permanently. All 17 of your operatives cease activities immediately. You return every dollar stolen from your victims, all 50 million plus. You turn yourself into federal authorities and confess to every crime. And I don't press charges for attempted murder against Devin Hood." Whitehead actually laughed. "You can't be serious. I've never been more serious in my life. You're asking me to destroy everything I've built, bankrupt myself, and spend the rest of my life in prison. In exchange for what exactly? Not pressing charges I could easily fight. In exchange for me not releasing the files publicly before the FBI arrests you. The way I see it, you have 2 options. Option 1, surrender now, cooperate with federal prosecutors, and maybe negotiate a reduced sentence. Option 2, I release everything to the media. Your name becomes synonymous with fraud and murder. Your family legacy is destroyed, and you go to prison anyway, but with 0 leverage. You're bluffing. You won't release those files. It would compromise any federal case against me." "Maybe," Cole said. "Or maybe I care more about justice than legal procedure. Maybe I want every person who's suffered because of you to know who you are and what you did. Maybe I want your grandchildren to grow up knowing their grandfather was a monster who drove men to suicide for profit." Something flickered in Whitehead's eyes, fear, or perhaps rage. "You're making a serious mistake, young man. The mistake was yours. You targeted me thinking I was just another broken divorce man looking for love. You didn't do your homework. I'm an appellate attorney who's made a career out of finding weaknesses in seemingly perfect cases. Did you really think I wouldn't find yours?" Whitehead stood slowly. "I came here to offer you money. A substantial amount, enough to solve any financial problems you might have. I'm prepared to write you a check for $5 million right now if you return the files and forget this ever happened." "I don't want your money. Everyone wants money, Mr. Ewing." "Not everyone. Some people want justice." Whitehead's mask finally slipped. The grandfatherly charm vanished, replaced by something cold and predatory. "You have no idea who you're dealing with. I have connections you can't imagine, political connections, law enforcement connections. I could have you disbarred, discredited, destroyed. One phone call, and your entire career evaporates. Go ahead and make that call, Cole said. I've already submitted my resignation to the firm. As of this morning, I'm no longer practicing law, which means there's nothing you can take from me and no bar association you can threaten me with. This clearly surprised Whitehead. You're willing to give up your career over this? I'm willing to give up everything to make sure men like you don't destroy anyone else. The silence stretched for a long moment. Then Whitehead nodded slowly. I see. You've made your choice. Unfortunately, that means I have to make mine. He pulled out his phone. Cole tensed, expecting him to call someone, backup, an enforcer, a corrupt cop. Instead, Whitehead opened an app and pressed a button. Nothing happened. Whitehead frowned, pressed it again. Still nothing. Looking for your security team? Special Agent Francis's voice came from the doorway. She stood there with her badge held high. 3 other FBI agents behind her with weapons drawn. They're currently being detained by my colleagues, as are the 2 vehicles you positioned 3 blocks away as backup, as is your son Tobias in Las Vegas, and 3 of your female operatives in different cities. This operation is over, Mr. Whitehead. Whitehead's face went gray. He looked at Cole with something approaching respect. You weren't negotiating. This whole conversation was. Evidence, Cole confirmed. Everything you just said was recorded and witnessed by federal agents. Attempted bribery, witness intimidation, conspiracy to obstruct justice. And that's just from the last 10 minutes. We haven't even gotten to the fraud, theft, and accessory to murder charges yet. FBI agents moved into the room. Whitehead didn't resist as they cuffed him, reading him his Miranda rights. Melissa burst into tears, collapsing on the couch. Devin Hood just looked relieved. As they led Whitehead out, he turned back to Cole one final time. You haven't won. My lawyers will tear your evidence apart. I'll be out in a year, and then... Cole said, because Devin Hood isn't your only cooperating witness. While you were busy trying to intimidate me, Morris Steele was interviewing 3 of your former operatives who were happy to testify in exchange for immunity. And the FBI has been monitoring your communications for the past 24 hours. We know about the offshore accounts. We know about the murdered witnesses. We know everything. Whitehead's face went from gray to white. He said nothing else as they took him away. Agent Francis approached Cole. That was reckless, Mr. Ewing. If he'd had a weapon, if his backup had gotten through. But they didn't, because you were prepared and because I trusted the system to work when given proper evidence. Still, you took an enormous risk. Some things are worth the risk, Cole said. He looked at Melissa, who was being cuffed now, still crying. How many charges? For her? Fraud, identity theft, conspiracy, witness intimidation. Probably 15 to 20 years if convicted. The others will face similar charges based on their level of involvement. Cole felt nothing looking at her. No anger, no satisfaction, not even pity. She was just another criminal who'd made bad choices and would now face consequences. And the victims? He asked. We're contacting all of them. The recovered funds will be distributed proportionally, though it won't be everything they lost. Asset forfeiture laws are complicated. What about Daniel Osborne's family? They'll be included in the restitution. I understand his sister works at Phoenix General. She does. We'll reach out to her. Make sure she knows her brother didn't die in vain. That his death led to justice for dozens of other victims. Agent Francis paused. Can I ask you something, Mr. Ewing? When did you actually figure it out? What did you know your wife was running a con? Cole thought about it. The first moment I met her, something felt too perfect, too calculated. I ignored it because I wanted to believe in second chances. But deep down, I think I always knew something was wrong. I just needed proof before I could act. That's one hell of an instinct. It's not instinct. It's experience. I've spent 15 years watching people lie under oath, construct false narratives, manipulate juries. You learn to see the tells. Melissa was good, maybe the best I've ever seen, but she wasn't perfect. Nobody is. The FBI spent another 3 hours processing the scene, taking statements, securing evidence. When they finally left, Cole was alone in his house with Michael, who'd slept through the entire takedown. He looked at his son, because whatever else was true, this was his son now, genetically or not, and made a promise. I'm going to be better, he said softly. Better than my father was, better than I was in my first marriage. I'm going to show you that integrity matters, that standing up for what's right matters, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. Michael yawned and grabbed Cole's finger, holding tight with impossible strength. Cole's phone buzzed. A text from Courtney. I heard. Thank you. For Daniel. And for all of them. I can finally let him go now. He typed back. Thank you for the warning. Without you, none of this would have happened. Her response came quickly. Take care of yourself, Cole. And that baby. Be the man I always wanted you to be. He would. Not for her. Not for anyone else, but for himself. And for Michael. Because in the end, that's what this had all been about. Not revenge, not justice, but the simple principle that some things were worth fighting for. Worth risking everything for. And Cole Ewing had proven he was willing to pay that price. Chapter 8. The Reckoning. The trial of Wilfred Whitehead became a media sensation. For 3 months, Phoenix was transfixed by testimony detailing the elaborate criminal enterprise he'd run for over 15 years. Each day brought new revelations. More victims, more money, more evidence of systematic psychological manipulation and fraud. Cole attended every day of the trial, sitting in the gallery where Whitehead couldn't avoid seeing him. It wasn't gloating. Cole had never been one for petty victories. It was a reminder that his victims were real people, not statistics or profit margins. The prosecution's case was devastating. Devin Hood testified for 4 days, laying out the organization's structure with meticulous detail. 3 of the female operatives followed, each describing how Whitehead had recruited them. Usually women with troubled pasts, buried secrets, desperate for money, and willing to cross ethical lines. Melissa testified under immunity, her voice shaking as she explained how she'd been recruited 8 years ago after a bankruptcy and failed marriage left her vulnerable. Whitehead had promised her financial security and a fresh start. All she had to do was play a role, seduce lonely men, gather their financial information, and disappear when the divorce was finalized. She'd been told the men were wealthy and wouldn't really suffer. She told herself she was just leveling an unfair playing field. When did you realize you were destroying people's lives? The prosecutor asked. I always knew, Melissa said, tears streaming. I just didn't let myself think about it. It was easier to see them as marks, as targets, than as human beings. Daniel Osborne was the first one who, her voice broke. He begged me not to leave. Told me he'd do anything, change anything. And I just walked away. 3 weeks later, he was dead. I knew it was my fault, but I kept going because I didn't know how to stop. The jury listened with stony faces. But the most damning testimony came from Morris Steele. The retired detective had spent years documenting the organization's activities, following leads the police had ignored. He presented a timeline showing 43 victims, estimated damages exceeding $60 million, higher than Hood's estimate, and 4 deaths that deserved to be investigated as potential homicides. When asked why he'd pursued the case so aggressively, Steele's answer was simple. Because James McAllister was my friend. Because he came to me for help, and I failed him. Because I couldn't live with myself if I let these people keep destroying lives. The defense tried to paint Whitehead as merely a lawyer who'd provided legal services to clients, with no knowledge of how they intended to use those services. It was a laughable strategy given the mountain of evidence, including recorded phone calls where Whitehead explicitly discussed targeting marks and strategies for maximizing asset extraction. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. The verdict was unanimous on all charges: fraud, conspiracy, money laundering, witness intimidation, and accessory to the death of Daniel Osborne. The judge sentenced him to 40 years in federal prison. At 72, it was effectively a life sentence. As they let him away, Whitehead looked at Cole one final time. His expression held no remorse, only cold calculation. Even in defeat, still looking for an angle, an appeal, a way out. There wouldn't be one. Cole had made sure of it. Melissa received 12 years, lighter than she might have, due to her cooperation and genuine remorse. Devin Hood got 5 years in a minimum security facility plus permanent probation. The female operatives received sentences ranging from 3 to 10 years, depending on their level of involvement and cooperation. Tobias Whitehead, the disbarred son who'd served as a recruiter, got 15 years. 3 corrupt police officers who'd taken bribes to suppress investigations received prison time and lost their badges. A federal prosecutor who'd been on Whitehead's payroll was disbarred and sentenced to 8 years. The entire rotten structure collapsed, exactly as Cole had intended. But the real victory came 2 months after the trial ended, when the FBI announced they'd recovered and returned almost $40 million to Whitehead's victims. It wasn't everything, but it was substantial, enough to rebuild lives, pay off debts, start over. Cole donated his portion to a victims' advocacy fund. He didn't need the money. He had something far more valuable. Michael, who was growing rapidly and developing a personality that suggested he'd inherited Cole's stubborn determination. DNA tests had come back during the trial. Michael was not biologically Cole's son. Melissa had used donor sperm exactly as Courtney had warned. But Cole didn't care. He'd filed for full custody and won easily. As far as he was concerned, biology was irrelevant. Michael was his son in every way that mattered. On a warm Saturday morning in October, Cole took Michael to a park in Arcadia. At 7 months old, the baby was fascinated by everything: trees, birds, other children playing. Cole sat on a bench, holding Michael on his lap, watching the world move around them. "Cole, He looked up to see Courtney standing there, looking healthier than she had in years. She'd gained weight, which suited her, and some of the haunted look had left her eyes. "Courtney, this is a surprise. I've been meaning to reach out." She sat down beside him, not touching but close. "I wanted to thank you. Again. Properly. What you did, taking down Whitehead, exposing the whole operation, it gave me closure. I can finally let Daniel go. I'm glad." Cole meant it. "You okay?" "I am. Therapy helps. So does the restitution money. It won't bring my brother back, but it'll pay for my nursing degree, help me start over." She smiled at Michael. "He's beautiful. Thank you. You're keeping him?" "Even though he's my son," Cole said firmly. "The circumstances of his birth don't change that." Courtney nodded. "You're a good man, Cole. Better than I gave you credit for when we were married. I'm sorry I didn't see it then. We were both young and stupid. Different people now. Very different." She stood. "I should go. I just wanted to say thank you and goodbye. Properly this time. Goodbye, Courtney. I hope you find what you're looking for." "You too." She walked away without looking back, and Cole was glad. They'd both moved on. The past was the past. His phone rang. Benjamin Young, his friend and colleague from the firm. "Cole, how's retirement treating you?" "It's not retirement, just a career change." Cole had been working with a nonprofit that provided legal services to fraud victims. The pay was terrible, but the work was meaningful. "Well, when you're ready to come back to real law, we've got a corner office with your name on it. The Morrison appeals set precedent in the Ninth Circuit. You're a legend here." "I appreciate that, Benjamin, but I'm happy where I am." "Fair enough. Hey, I'm calling because there's someone who wants to meet you. Heidi Murray. She's a journalist working on a book about the Whitehead case. She'd like to interview you about the investigation." Cole hesitated. He'd avoided media attention throughout the trial, letting the prosecutors and FBI take the credit. But maybe sharing his story could help others recognize similar cons before it was too late. "Tell her I'll do it, but only if she agrees to focus on the victims, not on me." "I'll let her know. Take care, Cole." Cole hung up and looked at Michael, who'd fallen asleep against his shoulder. The baby's face was peaceful, trusting. Cole felt a fierce surge of protective love. Whatever came next, interviews, appeals, attempts by Whitehead's remaining allies to discredit the conviction, Cole would face it. Because that's what you did when you stood for something. You didn't give up when things got hard. You didn't compromise your principles for convenience. You fought, even when the fight seemed impossible. Especially then, as the afternoon sun filtered through the trees and Michael slept peacefully in his arms. Cole Ewing felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Genuine contentment. Not happiness. That was too simple, too fleeting. But contentment. The knowledge that he'd done the right thing, that he'd stood up when it mattered, that he'd protected people who couldn't protect themselves. It was enough. More than enough. Chapter 9. The New Beginning. 6 months after the trial, Cole Ewing stood in the office of the nonprofit legal clinic he now directed. The space was modest, a converted warehouse in South Phoenix, nothing like the prestigious downtown offices of his former firm. But the work was more meaningful than any corporate appeal he'd ever argued. The clinic specialized in helping fraud victims navigate the complex legal system, people who'd lost money to scams, identity theft, or sophisticated cons like Whitehead's operation. Cole had assembled a small team of lawyers and paralegals, all of whom shared his commitment to justice over profit. Mr. Ewing? His assistant, Mary Pruitt, knocked on the open door. There's someone here to see you. Says it's urgent. Send them in. A man in his 50s entered, dressed in worn jeans and a faded jacket. His face was lined with stress, his eyes haunted in a way Cole recognized immediately. The look of someone who'd been targeted and was only beginning to understand the scope of their victimization. Mr. Ewing, my name is Jerome Green. I don't know where else to turn. His voice cracked. 3 months ago, I married a woman I met online. She was perfect, too perfect I see now. She moved into my house, got pregnant, and 2 weeks ago, I found out she'd been transferring money from my accounts. When I confronted her, she disappeared. All my savings gone. And now I'm getting calls from her lawyer threatening to sue me for domestic violence and child support if I go to the police. Cole gestured to a chair. Sit down, Jerome. Tell me everything. As Green talked, Cole listened with growing recognition. The pattern was identical to Whitehead's operation, right down to the pregnant wife and threatening lawyer, which meant either someone was copying the playbook or there were still operatives Whitehead had trained who were still active. I thought I was going crazy, Green said. Nobody believes me. The police say it's a civil matter. My family thinks I'm paranoid. But then I read about the Whitehead trial, and everything clicked. This is the same thing, isn't it? It might be, Cole said carefully. Do you have any documentation? Bank statements, text messages, photos. Some. Green pulled out a folder. I started documenting as soon as I got suspicious. My ex-wife works in banking. She's the one who noticed the irregular transfers and warned me. Cole spent 2 hours going through Green's evidence. The pattern was unmistakable. This wasn't a copy. It was a continuation. Someone had picked up where Whitehead left off. After Green left with a plan and hope in his eyes, Cole immediately called Morris Steele. We've got a problem, Cole said. The operation is still running. That's impossible. We locked up everyone involved. Not everyone. There must have been operatives we didn't know about, or someone new took over the infrastructure. I just interviewed a victim with a nearly identical story to mine. Send me the file. I'll start digging. But Cole was already ahead of him, pulling up the evidence Green had left. He examined the lawyer's letterhead. The firm was called Bennett & Associates, based in Houston. A quick search showed it was a legitimate firm, but the attorney who'd signed the threatening letter, D'Angelo Duran, wasn't listed on their website. Cole dug deeper, using the investigative skills he'd honed over the past year. D'Angelo Duran had been a paralegal at Whitehead & Associates until 5 years ago. He'd left under mysterious circumstances around the same time Tobias Whitehead had been disbarred. And when Cole ran a facial recognition search on the photos Green had provided of his wife, he got a hit. Lindsay Faulkner, one of the female operatives who'd managed to avoid prosecution by disappearing before the FBI raids. She'd been on a watch list, but apparently had resurfaced with a new target. They're not just continuing the operation, Cole said to Steele when he called back. They're expanding it. Someone must have salvaged Whitehead's client list and started rebuilding. Who would be crazy enough to do that? Someone who thinks they're smarter than Whitehead. Someone who learned from his mistakes. Cole's mind raced through possibilities. Or someone who's been doing this even longer than we knew, and Whitehead was just one branch of a larger organization. The implications were staggering. What if the operation they'd exposed was just one cell in a national network? What if there were multiple Whiteheads running similar cons in different regions? We need to contact the FBI, Steele said. If this is bigger than we thought. Already on it. Cole was composing an email to Special Agent Francis as they spoke. But this time, I'm not waiting for the system to catch up. If there are more victims out there, more people about to be targeted, we need to move faster. Over the next 2 weeks, Cole worked with Francis and the FBI to identify a pattern. Jerome Green wasn't the only recent victim. There were at least 6 other men in different states, Arizona, Texas, California, Florida, who'd reported similar experiences. The operation was more geographically dispersed than Whitehead's had been, which made it harder to track, but also suggested more resources and sophistication. The common thread was Lindsay Faulkner. She appeared in 3 of the cases, each time under a different name, which meant she wasn't just an operative anymore. She was coordinating multiple cons simultaneously. She learned from Whitehead's mistakes, Cole said during a strategy session with Francis and Steele. She's not using a central legal firm. She's working with local lawyers in each jurisdiction, making it harder to trace the pattern. And she's moving faster, marriage to divorce in under 6 months, which limits documentation and makes victims less likely to fight back. So how we stop her? Francis asked. Cole thought for a moment, then smiled. We use the same tactic I used against Whitehead. We make her think she's won. The plan was simple, but required perfect execution. Jerome Green would reach out to Lindsay, now calling herself Laura Frazier, and offer settlement. Big money, enough to tempt her into a face-to-face meeting. The FBI would wire the meeting, and when she arrived with D'Angelo Duran or whoever else was working with her, they'd be arrested on multiple charges. But Cole had a secondary plan that he didn't share with the FBI, because arresting Lindsay wasn't enough. He wanted the person who'd taken over for Whitehead, the new architect. While Green was setting up the meeting, Cole traced the financial trail. The money Lindsay stole wasn't disappearing into offshore accounts anymore. Those had been compromised during the Whitehead investigation. Instead, it was moving through cryptocurrency exchanges and emerging in legitimate businesses. One business in particular caught Cole's attention, a chain of relationship coaching centers called New Beginnings, based in Nevada. The company claimed to help divorced individuals rebuild their lives and find authentic connections. But when Cole examined the ownership structure, he found something interesting. The CEO was Roseanne Fritz, a licensed therapist who'd been sued twice for ethics violations related to client exploitation. More interesting, Fritz had a connection to Wilfred Whitehead. She'd served as an expert witness in 2 of his cases, both times testifying about the emotional vulnerability of divorced individuals. That's her, Cole said, showing Steele the evidence. She's the new architect. The relationship coaching centers are how she's recruiting operatives and identifying marks. Vulnerable people come in for help, and she either recruits them as operatives or flags them as potential targets. That's genius, Steele admitted grudgingly, and nearly impossible to prove. But not impossible. Cole pulled up New Beginnings' client database, which he'd accessed through means he preferred not to discuss with law enforcement. Look at these names. At least 20 of them match known victims or operatives from the Whitehead case. This isn't a coincidence. Fritz has been running the operation all along. Whitehead was just her East Coast division. She's the real mastermind. Getting evidence that would stand up in court required more work. Cole sent in an undercover operative, a private investigator posing as a recently divorced man looking for help. The investigator wore a wire and documented 3 sessions where Fritz subtly probed about his financial situation, assets, and emotional vulnerabilities. Then she introduced him to a relationship coach who could help him open his heart again, Lindsay Faulkner. The FBI moved on New Beginnings 2 days before Jerome Green's scheduled meeting with Lindsay. The raid uncovered everything: databases of potential marks, training materials for operatives, financial records showing millions in stolen assets flowing through Fritz's businesses, and recorded therapy sessions where Fritz actively coached operatives on psychological manipulation techniques. Roseanne Fritz was arrested along with Lindsay Faulkner, D'Angelo Duran, and 4 other operatives working in different states. The FBI recovered client files showing the operation had been active for at least 20 years, predating even Whitehead's involvement. How did you figure out? Francis asked Cole afterward. Pattern recognition, Cole said. Whitehead was too sophisticated to have built the operation alone. Someone with deep psychological knowledge had designed the manipulation protocols. Someone with business acumen had created the financial infrastructure. Someone who'd been doing this long enough to refine it into an almost perfect system. Fritz fit the profile. The trial was faster this time. Fritz's defense crumbled in the face of overwhelming evidence, and her lawyers convinced her to take a plea deal. 30 years with no possibility of parole. Lindsay Faulkner and the other operatives received sentences ranging from 10 to 20 years. The FBI's Victim Services Division identified over 60 additional victims from Fritz's operation, recovering almost $70 million in assets. It was the largest marriage fraud case in federal history. Cole stood in the courtroom as the final sentences were read, Jerome Green beside him. The man who'd walked into his office 6 months ago, broken and desperate, now stood tall, his faith in justice restored. "Thank you," Green said quietly, "for believing me, for fighting for me." "That's what we do," Cole said. "We fight." 1 year later, Cole Ewing stood in front of a congressional committee, testifying about the need for stronger federal laws against marriage fraud and romance scams. Michael, now 2 years old, sat in the gallery with Cole's mother, a woman who'd flown in from North Carolina specifically to support her son. "Gentlemen and ladies of the committee," Cole concluded his testimony, "the operations I've described represent a fundamental failure of our legal system to protect vulnerable individuals. Current laws treat these cases as civil disputes rather than the organized criminal enterprises they are. We need federal statutes with real teeth, mandatory minimum sentences for romance fraud, asset recovery provisions that prioritize victims, and most importantly, a federal task force dedicated to identifying and dismantling these operations before they destroy more lives." The committee chair nodded. "Thank you, Mr. Ewing. Your testimony has been invaluable. I'm pleased to inform you that we're moving forward with the Marriage Fraud Prevention Act, which incorporates many of your recommendations." After the hearing, Cole was approached by a woman in her 30s, professionally dressed, with kind eyes. "Mr. Ewing? I'm Camille Carson. I represent the National Organization for Victim Assistance. We'd like to offer you a position on our board of directors. Your expertise in identifying and prosecuting these types of crimes will be invaluable." Cole considered it. More work, more time away from Michael, but also more opportunity to prevent what had happened to him, and to Daniel Osborne, and to Jerome Green, and to dozens of others from happening to anyone else. "I'd be honored," he said. That evening, Cole returned to Phoenix and picked up Michael from his mother's hotel. They went to their favorite park, the same one where he'd said goodbye to Courtney 2 years ago, and Cole pushed his son on the swings while the sun set behind the mountains. "Daddy, higher!" Michael shrieked with delight. Cole pushed higher, watching his son laugh with pure joy. This child, who'd been conceived as part of a con, who'd been meant to be a weapon in someone else's plan to destroy Cole's life, had instead become the center of his world. The reason he fought so hard for justice. The reminder that good could come from even the darkest circumstances. His phone rang. "Morris Steele. Just got word from Francis. They arrested 3 more operatives in Atlanta, all connected to Fritz's network. That's the last of them. The operation is completely shut down." "Good," Cole said. "What about Whitehead and Fritz? Any appeal activity?" Whitehead tried to file for a mistrial based on prosecutorial misconduct. Judge dismissed it. "Fritz isn't even bothering. I think she knows she's done." "She is." Cole pushed Michael higher, eliciting more delighted screams. "We all are. Time to move on." "Agreed. Hey, I'm thinking about writing a book about this whole thing. Would you be willing to contribute? Share your side of the story?" Cole thought about it. His instinct was to decline. He'd never wanted the spotlight. But maybe telling the story could help others recognize the warning signs, avoid becoming victims themselves. "Yeah," he said, "I'll do it. But only if we focus on the victims and the operatives who chose to change. I want people to understand how these cons work, how anyone can be vulnerable, and how important it is to trust your instincts." "Perfect. I'll be in touch." After they hung up, Cole lifted Michael from the swing and held him close. The boy wrapped his arms around Cole's neck, trusting and secure. "I love you, buddy," Cole said. "Love you too, Daddy." Simple words, but they meant everything. As they walked back to the car, Cole reflected on the journey that had led him here. The betrayal that could have destroyed him, but instead had forged him into someone stronger. the victims who become allies, the enemies who become cautionary tales. Most importantly, he learned that winning wasn't about crushing your opponents or proving your superiority. Winning was about standing up for what was right, protecting those who couldn't protect themselves, and building something better from the ashes of what had been destroyed. Cole Ewing had won, not because he defeated Melissa, or Whitehead, or Fritz. He'd won because he'd become the man he was always meant to be, the man his son would grow up admiring, learning from, and hopefully emulating. And that victory, more than any courtroom triumph or public recognition, was the one that truly mattered. As he buckled Michael into his car seat and drove home through the Phoenix evening, Cole smiled. The past was behind him. The future stretched ahead, full of challenges and opportunities. He was ready for all of it. Epilogue. 5 years later, Cole Ewing sat in his office at the National Organization for Victim Assistance, reviewing case files. The Marriage Fraud Prevention Act had passed, creating new federal penalties for organized romance scams and establishing a victim restitution fund. Dozens of operations similar to Whitehead's and Fritz's had been dismantled across the country. Michael, now 7, was in 2nd grade and showing signs of inheriting Cole's analytical mind. The boy loved puzzles, strategy games, and asking endless questions about how things worked. Cole made sure to nurture that curiosity while also teaching him empathy, kindness, and the importance of standing up for others. Cole had never remarried. He dated occasionally, but carefully, with full transparency about his past and his priorities. His focus was Michael and his work. Everything else was secondary. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. His assistant. He'd hired Courtney Osborne after she finished her nursing degree and decided she wanted to help fraud victims in a different capacity. Stuck her head in. "Cole, there's someone here to see you." "She says it's about Melissa." Cole's stomach tightened. Melissa had been released from prison 6 months ago after serving 10 years of her 12-year sentence. She'd attempted to contact him twice, both times through official channels, requesting to see Michael. Cole had refused both times. "Who is it?" "She says her name is Jennifer Fitzgerald. She was one of Whitehead's operatives, but she testified against him. She's been working with the FBI's task force to identify other victims." Cole remembered her, a young woman who'd been recruited right out of college, did one con, and immediately realized she couldn't live with what she'd done. Her testimony had been crucial in establishing the pattern of recruitment and training. "Send her in." Jennifer entered, looking nervous but determined. She'd aged well. Her face had lost the haunted look Cole remembered from the trial, as she carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who'd done hard work to rebuild their life. "Mr. Ewing, thank you for seeing me. Call me Cole. What's this about Melissa?" "I've been working with the reentry program that helps former operatives reintegrate into society. Melissa is one of my cases. She's struggling. Guilt, depression, suicidal ideation. She talks constantly about her son, about Michael, and how she destroyed his life before it even began." Cole kept his expression neutral. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because she wrote you a letter, and the program director asked me to deliver it personally, to explain that she's not asking for forgiveness or contact or anything else. She just needs you to know that she's sorry, that she understands what she did, and that she hopes Michael grows up happy." She handed Cole an envelope. He opened it and read, "Cole, I don't expect you to read this, or care, or respond. I have no right to ask anything of you. But I need to say these things, even if only for myself. I destroyed your life, or tried to. I manipulated you, lied to you, planned to take everything from you. And worst of all, I used an innocent child as a weapon in that plan. There is no excuse for any of it. I tell myself I was desperate, broken, recruited into something I didn't fully understand. But the truth is I knew. Every step of the way, I knew I was hurting people, and I did it anyway because it was easier than facing my own failures. Michael is 7 now," I read. "2nd grade. Loves science and soccer. I keep tabs through the victim advocacy website. Not stalking, just needing to know he's okay. That you're raising him well. That I didn't completely destroy his chance at a good life. You gave him that chance. You could have walked away. He wasn't your biological son, and you had every legal right to let him go into the system. But you didn't. You chose love over genetics, principle over convenience. You're the father I was never capable of being a mother to match. I'm writing this in a halfway house in Tucson. I've been out 6 months. I have a job as a grocery store clerk. I attend therapy 3 times a week. I volunteer at a women's shelter, trying to help others avoid the path I took. I'm building something, not a good life, exactly, but maybe an honest one. It's the best I can do. I will never contact you or Michael again. This is goodbye, and it's permanent. Please tell him, when he's old enough to understand, that his mother loved him even though she didn't know how to show it. That she made terrible choices, but that he was never one of them. That her greatest hope is that he'll be nothing like her and everything like you. Thank you for saving him. And in a way, thank you for saving me, because exposing what I did forced me to confront who I'd become, and that was the only thing that could have started my path to becoming someone better. I'm sorry for everything. Melissa. Cole read it twice, then carefully folded the letter and placed it in his desk drawer. He'd keep it, not for himself, but for Michael, for when his son was old enough to understand his complicated origins and needed to know that even people who'd made terrible choices could still feel remorse. Tell her I received the letter, Cole said to Jennifer. Tell her I appreciate the apology, and I hope she finds peace. But also tell her this: the best apology is changed behavior. If she's truly sorry, she'll continue doing the hard work of rebuilding, of helping others, of being better. That's the only thing that matters. I'll tell her. Jennifer stood. Thank you, Cole, for believing people can change. A lot of the people I work with, former operatives trying to rebuild, they think the world will never forgive them, that they're permanently marked as criminals. Seeing you treat this with such grace, it gives them hope. Everyone deserves a second chance, Cole said, even people who've done terrible things. But second chances have to be earned. And part of earning them is accepting that some bridges can't be rebuilt. Some relationships can't be salvaged. Sometimes moving forward means leaving the past behind completely. After Jennifer left, Cole sat in silence for a long time, thinking about the letter, about Melissa, about all the lives that have been damaged and rebuilt in the wake of this case. His phone rang. Michael's school. Mr. Ewing? This is Principal Young. Nothing's wrong, but we wanted to let you know Michael got into an altercation today. He saw a 5th grader bullying a 2nd grader and intervened. The 5th grader ended up with a bloody nose. We're suspending Michael for 3 days per school policy, but I wanted you to know he was defending someone else. Cole closed his eyes and felt a surge of pride, so intense it almost hurt. I understand. I'll pick him up now. He found Michael sitting in the principal's office, looking defiant despite a bruised knuckle. I know I'm in trouble, Michael said immediately. But Dad, he was being really mean to Connor, and Connor was crying, and nobody else was helping, so I had to do something. Cole knelt down to his son's level. You did do the right thing. Standing up for people who can't defend themselves. That's always the right choice. But we're going to talk about the difference between defending someone and hitting someone, okay? There are usually better ways to help. But there wasn't time. He was about to push Connor again. Then you did what you thought was necessary. And we'll work on better strategies for next time. But Michael, Cole waited until his son met his eyes. I'm proud of you for having the courage to intervene. Not everyone does. Michael's expression shifted from defiant to relieved to proud. Really? Really? Now, let's go home and talk about why I'm also upset that you got suspended. As they drove home, Michael chattering about the incident and everything that had led up to it, Cole felt a profound sense of completion. This child, born from deception and manipulation, was growing into exactly the kind of person the world needed more of. Someone who stood up for others, who didn't tolerate injustice, who was willing to sacrifice his own comfort to help someone else. Melissa had written that her greatest hope was that Michael would be nothing like her and everything like Cole. But Cole knew better. Michael wasn't like either of them. He was entirely himself, better than both of them, untainted by their mistakes and failures, pure in a way that only children who've been loved unconditionally can be. And that, more than any courtroom victory or legislative achievement, was Cole's real legacy. Not the criminals he'd exposed or the laws he'd helped pass, but this one child he'd chosen to love and raise and guide toward becoming the best version of himself. The story that had begun with betrayal and deception had ended with redemption and hope. Not just for Cole, but for all the victims who'd found justice, all the operatives who'd found their way to rehabilitation, and most of all, for one 7-year-old boy who'd never know how close he came to being collateral damage in someone else's criminal enterprise. Cole Ewing had